They seem to think that it was a lone gunman who, while we had been earlier told was in custody, is now reported dead.
And I have some new information about the injuries. We know that at least 20 people were killed. We are now being told by Carillion's spokesperson that 4 patients are at the New River Valley Medical Center. 3 of those are in stable condition, and 1 is in critical condition, all with gunshot wounds. And then 3 additional patients have been brought to Roanoke Memorial Hospital. News 7's Rachel DePompa, though, we are told, has some additional information. Rachel.
Well, Jean, we are now hearing 22 dead, including the gunman. That word just came out. That is including the 1 person over at Ambler, Johnston, at least 20. It's still the ballpark figure, over at Norris Hall, which is an engineering building, classrooms in that area. But we are hearing 22 dead, including the gunman at this time. And that press conference you guys just saw out there, they want to let people know that they are notifying next of kin. They're going to release information as it becomes available from here in the spot at the Holtzman Conference Center on the Virginia Tech campus. But things are still coming in. But they do say, and I want to reiterate, they say the campus is secure right now.
Rachel,
they do believe the campus is secure.
Rachel, can you go over those numbers one more time? How many do they think were shot at Ambler, Johnston, and then how many at Norris? I'm not sure, and I don't know if you have that information exactly either, because I'd heard the one gentleman say multiple shootings at Ambler, Johnston, or West Ambler, Johnston, and then multiple at Norris.
Yes. At least 1 person confirmed dead at Ambler, Johnston, but multiple people were shot at Ambler, Johnston Hall. And then they're saying at least 20 are dead at Norris Hall, which is a classroom area. We have heard several reports of when that shooting happened, which was about 2 hours after the original one at around 7:15. There were reports of students jumping out of windows, even 4th floor windows. To get out of that building. And there are students, they've been grouped off in many halls in the area, in basements, and they are slowly letting those students out right now.
I'm sorry, Rachel, one of the officials said that they were staging release from campus buildings, apparently a building at a time, and yet you're telling us that they believe the campus is secure. In other words, there is no one at large that they are in search of.
Any other information on the gunman, Rachel? Who this? We know we heard them refer to the gunman as a man. Any other information on this person?
Not right now. They are not. We asked several questions about that, why this would happen, what this person was doing, if this was some kind of fight, or if this was related. You might recall last week there were 2 bomb threats at Virginia Tech over the last 2 weeks or so. You know, they're saying that they don't know if this is related at all. They are not releasing any information about this gunman, but I can tell you that they do believe that the gunman was responsible. Indications are right now for both shootings, and they do believe the gunman is dead at this time.
One can imagine, Rachel, that what the situation at Montgomery Regional Hospital is, they are continuing to receive casualties from this incident at Virginia Tech, and some of these people may be gravely wounded, some of them will be treated for injuries and we would hope released, but the hard part is sorting out the number who have expired and may have been fatally injured but arrived there in some...
We have been listening into the incredible information coming to us now from our affiliate in the situation at Virginia Tech University. The numbers have changed dramatically. We are now learning, according to the Associated Press, at least 20 fatalities. In fact, I have an update on that. 22 people dead, including the shooter, and 21 more people injured. Last we spoke, before going to our affiliate coverage here, we were aware of 1 fatality. We are now aware of at least 22 fatalities, including the gunman, who we understand has been found dead inside of Norris Hall. The amazing thing is, from what we heard in that brief press conference there, along with the chief of police at Virginia Tech, that apparently at 7:15 this morning, the first shooting took place. The 911 call came in over at the residence hall we've been telling you about, West Ambler, Johnston. 2 hours later, more shootings were reported around 9:15 or so at Norris Hall. That is where we believe at least 18 more people were killed, including the gunman.
That is the reporting that the shooter died at Norris Hall. Some of the victims were students. It is not known if the shooter was a student at Virginia Tech. Some of the victims were shot in a classroom. At this point, police believe the gunman acted alone, but it was shocking, just absolutely shocking to hear the story change from what we had been sharing with you throughout the morning here in the newsroom. Initial reporting was that one person was shot and killed, another person wounded, that at West A.J. Hall, the dorm, and that there was another incident at Norris Hall. Initial reporting was that 9 people had been wounded, and that had been the story, Heidi, through most of the morning. And in just the last few minutes, in the last 10 minutes or so, revealed that the shooting that we had been describing had turned out to be far worse.
And you know, it's unbelievable because the number of journalists that had gathered for that press conference that was held very briefly there by the chief of Virginia Tech Police and also the president of Virginia Tech itself. I heard them ask 3-4 times, did we hear you correctly?
No one
did
could
we
believe
hear you
it.
correctly? 20 fatalities, at least 20 fatalities at that point. And we have now since learned, as we've just been saying, according to the Associated Press, at least 22 dead, including the shooter, 21 more injured. And we heard Dr. Charles Steger, the Virginia Tech president, say this is a tragedy of monumental proportions. We are shocked and horrified, and of course they are going through that very grim procedure of notifying the next of kin right now.
Well, there is still so much to sort out here. Let's keep in mind we have heard descriptions of the lone shooter. We have heard descriptions from students of the succession of gunshots. We have asked the question whether it sounded like gunfire from an automatic weapon, and the response to that was no. We understand, as you look at these pictures here, there was an enormous police response to this episode on the campus, so there is still much to be sorted out. When you hear this figure of at least 20 fatalities, all kinds of questions come to mind. There were police obviously engaged in trying to bring this situation to an end. We don't know if the shooter was responsible for all of the shots fired, not trying to draw any conclusions here, but it will all be a part of the investigation. These are all questions that investigators will have as they try to ascertain what happened here, how this situation clearly escalated from one shooting to a separate incident at another hall where it sounds as though all hell broke loose.
Yeah, there's no question about it, and we've been giving you those reports early on about students jumping out of windows, trying to get safe and trying to get away from what I'm sure is, you know, you just can't imagine what they were seeing and what they were hearing. We do know this, of course, campus is closed, but also it was said in that press conference that the campus is secure at this point. So that would tell you without any sort of speculation that at least authorities there feel confident that the person they found was the gunman, because that campus, they are calling it secure. No classes tomorrow. Of course, campus is still closed today. Will open tomorrow, but there will not be classes held.
And that's an interesting point, because perhaps a lot of the students are learning that the campus is secure from us. We know that a number of students are watching CNN right now as we welcome our international viewers who would normally be watching Your World Today. We welcome you to this developing story here in the CNN newsroom. Many of the students that we've talked to this morning have still been in their rooms, still in their classrooms, some sitting on the floor there, locked down, as the campus has been locked down.
For well over 2 hours.
For well over 2 hours, and they had not received any indication that the campus was secure. Many were looking out of windows and still seeing police with guns drawn on the campus very near their building, so they might be receiving the news that the campus is secure from us this morning. That is the news that came out of the press conference just a short time ago. And Heidi, you want to talk with Jonathan?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. Do we have Jonathan on the line? He's another Virginia Tech student who is apparently an engineering student. So, Jonathan, is it correct for me to assume then that you were in Norris Hall at the time, because that is the Department of Engineering?
No, I was in Norris. I was in Randolph. It's the building directly behind Norris. The map you look at, it's to the upper left of Norris Hall there.
Can you tell us what you saw or what happened by way of your experience with this unbelievable morning?
I was actually prepared to head to Norris. I had my next class there, and as I was starting to leave the computer lab in Randolph, one of my friends came back in and said that people from Norris are running in. Our advisor is telling us to go back into our classrooms or any room, stay away from windows, and lock the doors.
So you were on your way over to Norris, and this is where you normally have your classes, obviously. What is your reaction to this unbelievable news? At first we had thought it was one person dead, and not to minimize the loss of even just one life, but now, my goodness, we're talking about 21 people dead, 22 including this shooter, whoever he may be.
Yeah, when we were ordered to leave campus, or told to leave campus, I had heard one, and I came back here, and it was got my apartment, and it was 20, and I'm shocked. I don't know how to deal with this at all, so.
I can only imagine, and obviously passing along to you that I know that there have been some counseling centers set up immediately on campus. If that is something that you and many people there are in need of, it would be available to you. We had learned that in the press conference, so that is certainly there. We so appreciate your time here. What is going on now? Are you off campus, you said? And
I live off campus, and they had us leave. Right around 12 o'clock. They told us that anybody on the academic side of campus should go home. And I don't know what all they did with the people that live on campus or anything, but I know I went back to my apartment. So.
Right. Well, Jonathan, we are very happy to have you, and happy to have you safe above all else, being that you are someone who frequents that building where all of this took place today, most of it anyway. So thank you again. Jonathan Schlessy's a Virginia Tech student, engineering student, in fact. So we appreciate your story, Jonathan.
And if I can just get a message to our control room, I just received an email that we've got some sound available, and while I reset this, maybe we can work on that, maybe getting the sound from the Virginia Tech president, Charles Steger. But if you're just joining us, it was revealed to us, just in the last half hour or so, Heidi, that the shootings that we have been describing to you this morning here in the newsroom has resulted in the deaths of at least 20 people. You see the updated number according to the Associated Press there at the bottom of your screen. It began to unfold at 7:15 a.m. this morning on the campus of Virginia Tech. That is in Blacksburg, Virginia, not far from Roanoke, with a shooting at West Ambler Johnston Hall. There were multiple victims there at West Ambler Johnston dorm. One person was killed in that dorm. Another person was injured. There was a second shooting at a second location 2 hours later, that being Norris Hall. And at Norris Hall, there were multiple victims. And it sounds as though, as we begin to put the pieces together here, it is here that things turned deadly in an amazing way. The shooter, we understand, died at Norris Hall. Some of the victims were students. It is not known if the shooter was a student at Virginia Tech. Some of the victims were shot in the classroom. Let's listen now to the president of Virginia Tech University. This is Charles Steger.
Well, today the university was struck with a tragedy that we consider of monumental proportions. There were 2 shootings which occurred on campus. In each case, there are fatalities. The university is shocked and indeed horrified that this would befall us, and I want to extend my deepest and most sincere and profound sympathies to the families of these victims, which include our students. At about 7:15 this morning, a 911 call came to the University Police Department concerning an event in West Ambler Johnston Hall. There were multiple shooting victims. While in the process of investigating, about 2 hours later, the university received reports of a shooting in Norris Hall. The police immediately responded. The shooter in Norris Hall is deceased. There are multiple fatalities. The number of fatalities has not been confirmed. Victims have been transported to various hospitals in the immediate area in the region to receive emergency treatment. And we will proceed to contact the next of kin as the victims' identities are available.
We have a ballpark figure on fatalities. It's at least 20 fatalities.
We heard that someone just walked into a classroom and opened fire. Is that true?
Some of the victims were shot in the classroom.
So the gunman walked into a classroom and opened fire on the students in there?
Some of the victims were shot in a classroom.
Do you believe it was one gunman and that gunman is deceased?
At this time, we believe it is only one gunman, yes.
And where is that gunman?
He is deceased.
There's another in custody.
Virginia Tech Police Chief there, Wendel, I missed his last name, but yeah, Fincham. It was an incredible press conference simply because just as we were getting word of these numbers, this is when we actually heard it coming from his mouth, that it was not just one fatality, it indeed was 21 and 22, including the shooter. Not a lot of information on how the shooter was apparently killed in all of this, but we do know that the majority of the fatalities did take place in that second location. You see it towards the top of your screen, Norris Hall. 2 hours after the 911 phone call and the apparent first incident that happened at Ambler, Johnston, one of the largest residence halls on the campus of Virginia Tech. So it is, there's so much to be filled in those 2 hours. Who knows what went on? I'm sure all of that is being investigated and looked into at this very moment.
And I know you want to get to this amazing eye report, but I am struck by the stark description that you were left with there from the chief, Flincher, of, and answering the question of, is it true that a shooter walked into a classroom? The chief said yes, so you are left with this stark image of the shooter walking into a classroom
Columbine.
And opening fire.
Exactly what we saw.
It would, yes, and so you can't help but that visual, we will certainly have it fleshed out in greater detail to be sure, but that is clearly the stark image that you are left with from that description of the events there in Norris Hall.
Yeah, and also him saying we have a ballpark number for fatalities, which again, you know, we believe we have narrowed that down, but this is still developing. So at least according to the Associated Press right now, 21 people dead and another, including the shooter, to make it 22, 21 injured. It really does remind me of Columbine. I was there in Colorado, covered that story, and it just seemed to get worse and worse as the situation ended up diffusing and this horrendous count came out of the people who were killed. We are hearing, you know, almost immediately this being compared to some events in history, one of the worst shootings of all time. So we are continuing to follow this for you and want to go ahead and get to the coverage that we brought you earlier from a student who was able to get out his cell phone and take these images as an eye report for us here at CNN. We want to go ahead and show that to you and let you listen to what happened. Report coming in from Jamal Abergoody. He was a Virginia Tech student, and what is incredible about this as we look at it now is when we first showed it to you, we had no idea of these numbers that were going to come out just a few minutes after the airing of this video. At this point, when we showed it to you first, we were only aware of one fatality. Now we are aware of 22, including the shooter, according to Associated Press. This video taking place and these shots being fired outside, or actually we can't really tell, but we hear the shots being fired. That is Norris Hall that you're looking at, and we do know that that is where the majority of the fatalities were found. So it is that much more eerie and disturbing now, watching that as if it wasn't to begin with.
Well, talk about eerie and disturbing. As we were describing events to you this morning in the newsroom, we were just dealing with eyewitness accounts and other students who were in the vicinity, and it was in abstract. And then you get this eye report, and if we could, maybe we can cue it up again, because this is video that you're going to see a lot of as this story continues to unfold and we get more information. But this is the site, this is the location where we had most of the fatalities, Norris Hall. And great, I think we're going to rack this up again for you. And let's listen again. No abstractions here. This is what was happening. As you take a look at these pictures, at this point the authorities don't know what they're dealing with. They don't know if they're dealing with a lone gunman, a multiple gunmen. They have no idea what they're dealing with. And think about the students inside that hall. Certainly the ones who were being confronted by this gunman, but also the other students in the engineering hall. What was it like for those students? We have received some calls from some of the students who were in the area, but obviously this was an unbelievable drama that was unfolding right there, with police not absolutely aware of what they were dealing with in all of its complexity.
And of course, we'd like to hope that, you know, if they were talking to us, they were other people who were on the line with 911 and giving all the information that they had, everything that they were hearing around them, everything that they were seeing outside of the windows, so that the police could do the best job that they could possibly do. All of that. Still so many questions, obviously, as this has just happened hours ago on the campus of Virginia Tech. You know, they're already comparing it to many other things. Of course, as we had mentioned, Columbine comes to mind, near Denver, Colorado. But also we are learning apparently one of the worst shootings on a university campus since 1966, and who could forget Charles Whitman? The top of the tower in the middle of the University of Texas campus, Austin, Texas, opened fire 27 stories below. He killed 15 people, including his own mother and wife the night before, but on campus, 15 people. Boy, I haven't heard a comparison back to that event in 1966 in a very, very long time.
And as we take a look at the scene here, once again, it took a long time for the authorities on the ground to get control of the situation. As you see them mobilizing here, this is from a couple of hours ago, of course, now. The first reports, the first 911 call at 7:15 a.m. This is a 2,600-acre campus, Virginia Tech, not Virginia Tech University, as I may have referred to earlier. My apologies, it is Virginia Tech. It took authorities a long time to secure that campus, and the kids who were on the campus were told to just stay in their room, to stay away from windows, just to stay locked down where they were as they tried to control the situation. And it took a number of hours, and there was a period in time there when an area was secured. Police informed some teachers in the area, some professors, that they were clear to go home, but it was clearly a methodical approach to clearing areas of that campus.
Yeah, from best we can tell from that map that we had been showing you, they were clearing the south side. There's that drill field right in the middle of the two buildings, where the residence hall is to the north, and then the Norris Hall, the engineering department building, to the south, and they were clearing the south portion first. At least that was what our understanding was of some of the reports that were coming down. Also want to make sure we show you this. We have another eye report that's come in, just video, but this comes to us from Dennis Hong, an eye reporter here for CNN. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. Unfortunately, not exactly positive of, you know, the direction or the angle that this was shot from, and what building we're looking at. But you can see a flurry of activity now. Not sure if that's another police officer. Pretty tough to see, but...
But Heidi, as we look at these pictures of those early moments when police were trying to cordon off the entire university, the entire Virginia Tech campus, your thoughts now turn to the parents of all of these students. Now with the gravity of the situation clear to everyone, and still, as we keep in mind, the investigation continues and the campus is going about the grim job of informing the parents of the deceased. Your thoughts turn to the parents. They send their young people to college to get an education. Virginia Tech, storied facility there, Virginia Tech, in Blacksburg, and now comes this news today that there has been this horrible set of events on this campus with at least 20 people killed, and we know that at one point the gunman walked into a classroom and opened fire. How do you begin to tell that story to the parents of these students?
Yeah, and you know what? It is all that much more unbelievable because of the year that this university and these students and faculty have had, because of the other incident that took place not that long ago, happened in August. Tony, I know you guys were covering this here before I had a chance to move down here, but a police officer and a security guard also killed on the campus of Virginia Tech. We heard one of the students that we had on the line a little bit earlier talking about what an incredibly tough year this has been.
Yeah. Bomb threats, as you mentioned, the episode in August. Boy, I remember that one pretty vividly.
I want to ask you about, we're using this with abundance of caution. Early reports show that the person may have used, and once again, they're early reports, so we want to be clear that we have not independently confirmed this yet, that maybe a 9mm handgun may have been used. Can you tell us a little more about this?
That is a distinct possibility, and as I said earlier, that even with a handgun and a semi-automatic handgun, you can get a magazine with as many as 15 or more rounds in that magazine. And if you've got several magazines, it only takes an instant to really change that magazine. And that semi-automatic pistol would work the same way as I talked about a semi-automatic assault weapon. You just have to release the trigger each time and pull it quickly, and you can do that very quickly. You can get a 15-round clip of bullets out of a semi-automatic handgun in far less than a 30-second time frame if you continue to pull them that way, and you can reload and continue.
And Don, I'm going to ask you, from your experience in situations where you've seen where there's been a large number of people killed over a period of time, is there any profile of a shooter like this, someone who walks into a public space and seemingly shoots randomly? We don't know if he knew anyone specifically, but at least 22 people are dead, and we know that at least he intended to inflict a lot of damage on a lot of people.
Well, you're right, Allison, and I get on a little bit of a slippery slope because I'm not a profiler, but I certainly work with a lot of them along, some of them that's on your network that you use frequently in our careers, and I think that they would say that you're probably going to be looking at a person who certainly has some deep-seated, to say the least, some deep-seated psychological issues, but may have been a very quiet type of individual and storing up with all types of animosities and issues that they have with them that cause them to all of a sudden one day explode. And if this person was acting alone, you know, many of these shootings we see, there may be 2 or 3 people acting together, sort of a planned attack, if you will, with others. But if this person is acting alone, I think the profilers would say this is a person that's been very close to himself, probably hasn't talked to anybody else about this types of thing. And if people would come out of the woodworks after it's all over, they'll probably say, oh my goodness, I'm so surprised he was so quiet, or she was so quiet and shy, and they kept to themselves and mind their own business. I think that when you look at their products, their living areas, and so forth, that the profilers will be able to put together a pretty good person who was reserved and non-assuming, that no one would have thought would have done this.
So I'm guessing the next step for law enforcement is, now that we know that the suspect is dead, is identifying the suspect and trying to find any kind of information, computers, where he lived. etc.
That's exactly right. And today with computers, oftentimes you find a lot of people who are somewhat reclusive in our technical world today sort of live on their computers. Not so much the cell phones, unless there's a computer in it, a Trio or something of that nature, but they live on their computers. They get their information from that. They get their equipment from that. They can order online and so forth. So they'll be able to really paint a clear portrait as to who this person was.
And because you're former FBI, I can ask you this question. At this point, the FBI's involvement in this is evidence gathering. Walk me through some of the other evidence. We talked about the computer evidence. What else will they be looking for?
Excuse me. Well, they're going to be looking for everything they can about the background of this individual. So not just the computer information, because the computer information is probably going to tell them somewhat about the background, but perhaps more about his associates or the dealings or the type of entities that he was involved with, whether it was communications through the internet, and kind of get a little bit of, again, a snapshot as to who this person really was. But it also should be able to tell them purchase points as to where he may have purchased these weapons from, his ammunitions, places that he frequented, and etc. So they will definitely want to paint a picture of this person and find out exactly who this person is. And I think that's where the FBI can play a real good role in working with the local department.
All right, and before I let you go, just as an FBI agent, you've seen a lot, you've heard a lot. What do you think about this?
You know, when I think I've seen it all, then I see something like this. When you look at the numbers of this, and I'm looking at the numbers of at least 22 dead and 28 injured, you know, this is so startling, because this is like a combat operation in full combat that you would see this many people. So when I think of this, it just absolutely sets me back, as that one person could deliberately go through and shoot this many people. And you know, you're talking close to 50 people here or more that's been hit by one of these bullets. It's absolutely amazing that one could procure that much ammunition and have that type of firepower to be able to do it all by themselves. So I think the authorities are going to be looking into that pretty heavily, as that how could he go around with this much firepower to be able to do this type of damage.
Don Clark, former FBI, thank you so very much. We appreciate you walking us through this. We want to take you to the White House press briefing room. Dana Perino is speaking out about the shootings today.
Families of the victims themselves, the students, the professors, and all the people of Virginia who have dealt with this shocking incident, and his thoughts and prayers are with them, and we are monitoring the situation. And whereas state and local authorities are in the lead right now, I think that will remain the case, but federal assets are available should they be needed if Virginia were to request them. On Iraq, this is the 70th day since the president requested emergency funding for our troops. President Bush spoke with Iraqi Prime Minister Maliki via secure video this morning. That lasted about 50 minutes. The two leaders discussed ongoing efforts.
You've been listening to Dana Perino. She's now gone on to the news of the day, but obviously wanted to offer her condolences from the White House regarding those 22 people who have been killed and the 28 who have been injured at the Virginia Tech shootings. My colleague Nora O'Donnell takes over our continuing coverage of the campus shootings at Blacksburg, Virginia. Nora?
And thank you, Allison Stewart. That's right. I'm Nora O'Donnell, continuing our coverage of this breaking news. What the president of Virginia Tech, Charles Steger, says: today, the university was struck with a tragedy that we consider of monumental proportions. The university is shocked and indeed horrified.
A little bit nervous, obviously, within that situation. Who wouldn't be?
Yeah, and I just ran from my car to my apartment because my phone was dying.
Yeah. Now I understand from producers here that you're a sophomore at the university. Were you there in August when there was a shooting involving a security guard in August?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, and they say you have some concerns right now, obviously.
Yeah, I'm just like a little concerned, like, why does keep happening here? And like, the school, like, I really wouldn't think that it would happen. And I'm from Philadelphia, so my question now is, why would I go to a school 6.5 hours away when my safety is in jeopardy?
Yeah, and you know what, our thoughts and our prayers and our hearts go out to you and your fellow students as well. Right now, tell us what you're doing. How far away from the campus are you? You said you just got home. Do you live on campus or off?
I am off campus.
You're off campus. What was it like getting out of the building and going through? Did you have to drive or walk or take the bus from your school to where you live?
I had to walk to my car in the commuter lot, and it was just stunning to see how many cop cars were there and how many ambulances were there. And I had to walk up to an officer and ask him if I could even get to my car because I wasn't sure at that point if I could or not. So I was trying to figure out if I wouldn't be able to, how I was going to get back to my apartment.
You said we'd be shocked by or stunned by the number of ambulances and cop cars. Describe to us that scene when you were walking to the parking lot. How many did you see? Could you even count them?
There must have been at least over 20 or 30 cop cars and ambulances. Like, every street was lined with them. I did not see, like, openings at all. Like, it was really scary, and, like, all the cops had, like, vests on, and some had guns in their hands and everything, and it just, I felt like I was, like, in a war zone or, like, in the middle of, like, a city or something. It was just very, very unsettling.
I'd have to imagine that at 7:15 in the morning, and then shortly after that, the second call came in. Did you feel like you were dreaming, that you hadn't awakened from your night's sleep this weekend?
Yeah, it just seemed very, very unreal. Like, none of us could really comprehend, like, what was going on. I think a lot of us were in shock and denial. Like, it still seems like it's so unreal. Like, Virginia Tech, like, I felt so safe coming here, and I just really can't believe it happened not once but twice this year. It's just really shocking.
Yeah, and Loris Paventa, thank you so much. That is a sentiment from a number of students and a number of people who have been calling us from the campus, and that is an obvious reaction when you get word that you have to stay in place in your classroom and then possibly 21 to 22 of your fellow students and staff members, or either staff members, may have been hurt or killed in this incident. Thank you very much, Loris Paventa, for that. You're watching the CNN Newsroom, and this is all unfolding as we speak right there on the campus of Virginia Tech. I'm going to send it over to my partner now, Betty Nguyen, who is at the news desk. Betty?
Yes, Don, we want to really get a scope, an idea of the scope of this shooting here. At least 22 people dead at this moment, some 21 people injured according to the Associated Press. So let's just think about that for a second. If you put those numbers together, this is the deadliest campus shooting in U.S. history. The last one, even close to the scale, was when Charles Whitman went on top of the tower in the middle of the University of Texas at Austin back in 1966 and opened fire 27 stories below. That killed 15 people, including his mother and his wife the night before. Today we're talking about at least 22 students dead. We want to speak with one of the students there on campus of Virginia Tech. Elizabeth Stewart is her name, and we have her by phone. And Elizabeth, what I understand is that you got word this morning that something was going on when you heard megaphones outside your window.
I first woke up this morning about 10 o'clock. I was actually supposed to be doing my student teaching today. However, I got sick and decided to stay home today. At first I woke up and I thought it was honestly the wind, because we've been under a high wind warning for the past few hours. But I thought I heard something on top of that, and I thought, well, I know that the wind's been really bad. Maybe it's something having to do with the weather. So I got up, checked my email, saw that classes had been canceled, and thought, okay, what's going on? And it was only a little while later when I checked the website and saw that there was a shooter on campus.
And what did that website tell you to do? To lock the door, stay inside? What did it direct you to do?
Well, pretty much had to do what we did last August when we had William Morville running around campus. I got up, locked the door, called my mother at work in Richmond to let her know that I was okay, called to check up on my brother because he's a senior here at Tech, and pretty much just turned on CNN and tried to make sense of what was going on.
We'll talk to you a little bit more about what happened in August, but at the same time, you understood that your roommate had already gone to class that morning. Was there concern there for you?
I was a little, but she works in a lab on the Ambler Johnston side of campus. However, she was far enough away where I wanted to, and called right after I got off the phone with her to know that she was okay. So I got that phone call. I wasn't too worried.
So what are you hearing at this moment, and do you know anyone who may have been in West Ambler Johnston Hall or Norris Hall today?
Well, ma'am, actually I worked as a resident advisor for 2 years here at Tech. I worked in the same area that Ambler Johnston is included. I was a little bit concerned at first, so I started getting on email, getting on Instant Messenger to make sure that some of my friends were okay. So far I've gotten positive responses back, but as for Norris, I don't know anybody over there.
Have you heard about those who indeed were injured or possibly killed in this?
No, ma'am, we haven't heard anything so far. All I've been hearing out of my friends is just extreme shock, in anger. I mean, we are all so upset right now. None of us can really comprehend what's going on right now.
Shock, I can definitely understand. Anger, do you feel like you're not being protected, that you're not safe there on campus? What's sparking the anger?
I really do feel like this is just an isolated incident. Like I said, I worked as an RA here for 2 years, and I worked with VTPD. Security-wise, I wasn't too concerned. It's just I cannot believe that somebody had the nerve to bring a gun onto this campus and start shooting up everybody who didn't deserve it. I mean, it's just crazy. None of us can really understand it right now.
It's really hard for all of us to grasp. And when we're talking about at least 22 people killed, not sure if they're all students, but at least some of them are students. And in talking with you, you had mentioned last August, folks there on campus have really dealt with a lot within this school year. Talk to us about what occurred back in August and why that has some concern for you today with what happened there this morning.
It was just another reminder. Woke up this morning and saw the emails that classes had been canceled, and that my mind instantly went back to last August because it was the same emails we got back then. Classes were canceled, stay inside, lock your doors if you're off campus, stay where you are. And that's what my mind instantly flashed back to. At first, I honestly was hoping that it was something having to do with the weather, like I said, because of the megaphones and everything outside, but I saw the thing about the shooter on campus, and I'll admit, I was a little worried about what was going on, but I mean, it's just complete shock and anger around here right now.
Has it changed your mind any about whether you want to continue staying at Virginia Tech?
Oh, no, ma'am, not at all. I do believe, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, that these are two freak incidents. I came here to Tech as a freshman in the fall of 2002, and I love my school with all my heart and soul. I really do, and I hope that one day, if I ever get married and I'm lucky enough to have kids, that they choose to come here.
That's the spirit. Elizabeth Stewart, a graduate student there at Virginia Tech. We appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
And Betty, I can't believe these kids are as calm as they are calling in. Obviously, some of them are upset, but just, you know, an adult.
22 people killed on campus today. This is the deadliest campus shooting in U.S. history, and so when you try to wrap your brain around that and comprehend what has happened there today, it is enormous.
It's just unbelievable. Just a little while ago, we heard from the president of Virginia Tech, Charles Steger, and he said that today the university was struck with a tragedy that we consider of monumental proportions. You can certainly understand why. He held a press conference just a short while ago. Let's take a listen to that.
Hear it? I did not hear it. I was asleep. It was around 7 o'clock, I guess. I was really surprised they didn't close campus then.
Yeah, I bet. And were you what was your thought when you're on your way to school, you're on your way to your class then, and then you heard more gunfire? Then what did you do?
I kind of froze, turned around. I started running, and cops swarming the building. I was really scared, I guess.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going on.
What did you think about that first shooting, and was there talk in your building about who did it or what had happened or who I don't want you to tell us who the deceased is because I know that families are still being notified, but what did you think? What did you hear about that situation?
I actually didn't know it was a shooting until on my way to class. The cops wouldn't tell us anything. No one knew what had happened. Then I heard that someone had been shot, and they sent us an email about it, but I'd already left for class.
Yeah. And what are you hearing now about what happened in Norris Hall? We're hearing, a couple of different stories about whether or not people were lined up execution style in that classroom, and we just frankly don't know, exactly what happened there. I guess, what are you hearing?
I'm not positive. What I've heard is that it was one gunman came in there heavily armed and started shooting people in classrooms. That's all I've heard.
Did you hear that it was more than one classroom or that it was all in one classroom?
I haven't heard.
All right.
But I did see people running out of there and cops escorting.
And of the people who were running out of there, were any of them injured?
Not that I could tell, but I was pretty far away. They kept us back, so I didn't have a real good view.
Right.
Ambulances did drive up, about 5 of them, half an hour later, and started taking people away.
And what about where everybody is now? Are some people still in lockdown? We've heard that they're releasing people in stages and talking to them. What can you tell us about that?
I believe some people in some buildings are still locked down. The main campus is all locked down. We're supposed to stay in our dorms. Some people are outside. But there's a couple academic buildings that they haven't let people out of yet, from what I hear.
Josh, I know there was an incident, that there were some bomb threats earlier in the week. Tell me what's going through your mind about what might have prompted this situation or whether it might be connected to anything else.
Well, I wasn't worried about the bomb threats. I figured it was just people trying to get out of tests, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, one of them was like written on a piece of paper and stuck in an envelope and given to the engineering department. I'm not sure if they're related. I mean, they could be, but I have no idea.
And, you know, in terms of how far it is, what are you hearing about whether or not there was one gunman? Because they said there was one gunman and that gunman is deceased. And yet the president of the university at one point said because that other shooting happened so much earlier, they don't know whether or not those two incidents are connected. Any thoughts on that?
I've heard at least 2 gunmen. I don't know for sure, though. I mean, I've heard 1, 2, 3. So I'm not sure which is correct.
Josh, did you take, you know, everybody's had their cell phones out. Did you take pictures? What did you stop to do anything, or were you just frozen?
I actually brought in my camera to take pictures outside of my dorm in the morning, and I had it with me, so I did take about 50 to 60 pictures when I was over by the drill field.
All right, Josh, we're going to continue to follow this, and we're going to continue to talk to you. We're going to switch over to another person right now and get some more information from the law enforcement side. So hang on for us, Josh, okay? All right, let's bring in Bill Daly, former FBI investigator, who's joining us. Bill, we're starting to see all of these pictures, some of them of people, you know, of law enforcement carrying students out of this situation. Your thoughts? I know the FBI is on the scene, as is protocol, we're told, after 9/11.
Yeah, that's correct, Martha. They're there both to lend general assistance to law enforcement and the campus police, and also respond in the event that there was any terrorist connection, of which there is nothing to suggest that at this moment. However, Martha, you know, as they go through this stage release of individuals on the campus, as much as everyone would like to have their loved ones rushed out into safety, it's important for law enforcement to be able to control the situation, both to look for any other perpetrators who may mix themselves in with the student population, as well as also talk to witnesses to make sure that their information is not polluted with what they may hear from the media or talking to other students, and they get a clear and crisp idea as to what happened, and see whether or not we do have, you know, one shooter or several shooters who may also be complicit, if there is anyone complicit at this point. So law enforcement at this point, although may be looked upon as holding up loved ones from reaching their students and the faculty, it is an important aspect of conducting an investigation such as this. And although it does seem at this moment that the situation is stable and there's no other shooters on the loose, they just can't be sure.
You know, we have one picture that we've been showing of a person who looks like he's being handcuffed. And that, I think, is a bit of a confusing message to people, because we're not sure whether or not that person had anything to do with what happened today. But would it seem to make sense to you that anybody who was suspicious, you know, this is obviously a pandemonium situation, and law enforcement, of course, wants to keep everything under control that they can, but they're not going to take any chances, right?
Exactly, Martha. You know, we need not confuse the fact that they're, as in this picture, handcuffing someone and subduing them, that they happen to be involved in the shooting. They could be someone who either acted inappropriately, acted aggressively, who couldn't identify themselves for a number of reasons. They just feel as though it's important that that person be taken away from the scene and talked to privately and learn more about them. So we do have word that apparently, you know, a shooter has been killed on the scene. The facts are still unfolding as we speak, but it's not
right.
that infrequent that there could be others, much like we saw in the Columbine situation.
Bill, does it concern you? You know, there was the early morning shooting in the dorm room. One person, we believe at this point, was killed in that situation. Then, almost 2 hours later, this other, much more massive shooting that happened in Norris Hall. Does the time difference concern you in terms of whether or not it might have been done by 2 different people? Are they closing the book too quickly on this one gunman idea?
I think in an investigation like this, you always have to, you know, be open to the fact of evolving circumstances. And although, you know, there's a time gap here of several hours between the first reported shooting and then the other shootings, which seem to be most of the deaths occurring at the hall, at the classroom hall, we still need to keep open the fact that there could be others involved. However, you know, it's interesting is that one of the thoughts here is that it could have been someone coming back looking for a girlfriend and then moving on to where the classrooms are. there is a thread you can pull through here, and to say that whoever it was showed up at the dormitory facility, had a very specific location they were going to, and then went off again to another very specific location. So it would suggest that there was some either planning, or someone had a specific intent of where they were going, different than what we saw way back in the 1966 shooting, when Charles Whitman shot from a tower at the University of Texas in Austin, where he killed the 15 people, and that was more of a random shooting where he was keeping people and law enforcement pinned down for hours.
What's going through your mind in terms of this shooter? We understand that he's deceased, but we don't know whether or not that happened inside that room, whether he shot himself or whether he was taken down by law enforcement or even someone else.
Yeah, we don't know that. We don't know whether this was a case of suicide by a police officer, where he wanted to be shot at the end of this, or whether he took his own life. It's in situations like this, Martha, as in any major crime, is that information will come out slowly, and it's very important not to judge too quickly as to what may or may not have happened. But at least right now, it appears as though that the law enforcement, police on the campus have things in check, and the immediate threat seems to have been abated.
All right, Bill Daly, stay with us if you would. We're going to continue to cover this with your help. We want to go now to the phone, and Bill Salmon, who's joining us. He's, of course, a frequent guest of ours. He has 2 children at Virginia Tech. Bill, I can not imagine what this day has been like for you.
All right, Kenneth Trump, thank you very much, a school safety expert. Stand by if you can. I want to bring in Tim Martin again, who is with WFIR Radio, who is reporting from the scene. And Tim, what are they doing now there on the campus? People who are watching this who have children that attend the Virginia Tech or have friends there, how are they telling them to call and perhaps get in touch with them to make sure their loved ones are okay?
What they're doing is they're setting up where the press conference was held, the Alumni Center. That's going to be where parents can come and get information and try to contact their students. But at this moment, there are a lot of students that are just leaving campus. Students are just loading up in the cars, carpooling. I'm not sure if they're going home or what, but a lot of students are leaving at this point. I just left downtown Blacksburg, and if you set the mood there, if you will, there are a lot of stunned faces there, because this is a very close-knit community that had to regroup from what happened last summer when William Morva went on a spree in this town, and now for this to happen of unprecedented measures is remarkable. Everyone in Blacksburg is just pretty much stunned, and it's easy to imagine that this is what everyone is talking about.
Yeah, Tim, you mentioned that. Describe that, because I know a number of the students, I guess, there on the ground are talking about, what happened in August 2006. It was the opening day of classes, and they were canceled because some jail inmate got on campus?
Absolutely. William Morva escaped from a hospital. He shot the guard at that hospital, killed him. Then that was in the early morning hours. The next day, he was on a trail on his way to Virginia Tech, walking with a gun. A police officer passed him, recognized him. He shot that police officer, killed him, and then was caught somewhere right around the Virginia Tech campus. There were reports that he was on campus. The school was put in lockdown mode like it was today. But what's ironic is that was the very first day of classes, and with just a few weeks left to go until the school year is over. If you were a freshman, or for that matter anybody here at Virginia Tech, this has been pretty much an unbelievable year.
Tim, what do we know about the suspect who apparently killed himself, was carrying 2 9mm guns? What do we know about him?
Well, what I understand about him is that he is a student. That's what we're hearing, that he was a student that possibly had a problem with his girlfriend or had a problem with the professor. And he shot himself. He was a young man, 18, 19 years old, is what I understand. That may be rough. 18 to 22 years old is what we're hearing. But the police are not giving much information about identities of these victims, about the suspects, or about the number of injuries.
Tim, and one of the students who was shot actually called into MSNBC, described the suspect for us here on MSNBC. Stand by. I want to play for you what he told us here on MSNBC.
I was shot in my upper arm and then went through my arm and an exit.
And where were you when you were shot? What happened just the moments before it happened?
I was in my class on the second floor of Norris Hall, which is an academic building on this campus.
So you're in Norris Hall, you're in the engineering building, and did you see the shooter face to face?
Yes, he came into our room and started shooting. He probably let off 12 to a floor. I was one of maybe people who got shot only in our room.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
He let off a full round in our room, and I was probably one of 10 or 15 people just in our classroom who got shot.
Oh my gosh. In terms of, could you see what he looked like? Did he look to be student's age? Was he white? Was he black? Was he young?
Yeah.
Was he old?
He was about in his 20s, I'd say. He was Asian. He had on a maroon hat and a black leather jacket.
So an Asian man in his 20s, a maroon hat and a black coat?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he say anything to you?
No, he just started shooting.
And did he stay in the classroom and shoot and look at you guys, or did he just move on right away?
He just left shots and then left.
And you said that you were one of several people in your room who were shot. Who else, unfortunately, was shot?
A lot of my classmates and possibly my professor, too.
And were the classmates and the professor, was it the kind of thing, you know, you're shot and you're sitting here talking to me? Were they shot and able to speak and able to leave the room, or was somebody more critical?
Some were a lot more critical. The people who were less critical, like myself, and then two other mates were able to hold the door shut because he tried to get back into our room.
So you guys actually barricaded the door to keep this man from coming back in the room?
Yes, ma'am. And he tried shooting through the door at us.
And didn't say anything. Did his clothing say anything? Was there any sense that he had a mission? Did he seem to recognize anybody in the room?
No, it was just random shooting.
So once this happened and you realized that you'd been shot, are you shot in your upper arm or your forearm, Derek?
It went through my bicep and down to my tricep.
So you realized you were hurt. What did you guys do next?
The police came into our hall and then cleared the hall. And we all ran out of the room and then out to ambulances that were waiting.
And Derek, what year are you in school?
I'm a sophomore biology major.
So you were around for that shooting in August, huh?
Yeah, the escaped convict.
So what did you think when you saw this happening again? What went through your mind?
At first I thought it was a joke. Like, you don't really think of a gunman coming onto campus and shooting everybody. But then it became very surreal very quickly.
I can imagine. All right, Derek O'Dell, thank you so much, and please take care.
Thank you, Al.
And that was my colleague Allison Stewart speaking with a short time ago, Derek O'Dell, in what is a breathtaking interview. He was shot in the upper arm and his bicep at Norris Hall, which is an academic building, and described how they had to, that his professor may have been shot and that they had to barricade the door to try and keep the shooter out. Tim, when you hear that, your reaction?
I tell you what, that boy's got a lot of courage to do something like that, to be shot, and able to talk about it and able to describe it. And I think what will come out in all of this is that all these students that lost their lives are heroes, and for what they've done. And when we learn more details about what happened, you know, these kids are heroes, and that's something that their parents should know.
Absolutely. And Tim, describe what the police chief said to you earlier when you guys were at that news conference. Any indication why most of the fatalities were from the second area where a shooting occurred, this Norris Hall, this academic building? He had been at this one dormitory at 7:15 in the morning, and then 2 hours later showed up at this academic building.
Yeah, you know, really there's not a lot of indication of why that happened. I've heard that, you know, he was in there. I've heard that he lined people up and was looking for his girlfriend, and the people that didn't know where the girlfriend was, that they were shot. But that's what some students have said. But the police are really not knowing. I'm sure that they're right now in the process of interviewing witnesses and all of that were in these buildings that are uninjured. But as of right now, there are just so many unanswered questions as to why this happened, as to why there was a 2-hour difference between the first shooting and the second shooting, and really as to why campus was shut down 2 hours after the first shooting took place.
Absolutely. Tim Martin, thank you very much. And we're just getting in a statement from the governor of Virginia, Timothy Kane, who is apparently overseas in Tokyo, Japan, on a trade mission, who has just announced that he is going to leave Japan so that he can return to the Commonwealth, be back there tomorrow. And he is saying that he urges all Virginians to keep these victims and their families in their thoughts and prayers. So the governor, returning from an overseas trip to be there, to return to his state, to Virginia Tech University, a university of more than 26,000 students, which may have just suffered the worst university campus shooting in history, with more than 22 dead and another 28 injured at this hour. The gunman dead, apparently having shot himself after this shooting rampage this morning at the university. We're just getting in some new pictures now, which we want to show you. These are still pictures, which we can see here, some of the action that happened on the ground there at Virginia Tech this morning. Clearly, these are very graphic pictures, so if you have children in the room, this would be a time to take them out of the room. We don't know who this individual is, but these are some of the photographs that were taken that are now available through the media that we are showing you after this horrible rampage this morning, that the university president, Charles Steger, said that he is shocked, indeed horrified, and he said a tragedy that we consider of monumental proportions. The Virginia Tech police chief, Wendel says because the gunman is dead, they do believe that the campus at this hour is secure. They were not willing to release information about the weapons used in this shooting, but our own NBC's Pete Williams reporting that he's hearing from officials it may have been 2 9mm handguns. And again, that the suspect is described not only by law enforcement officials, but also by a witness who was shot and called into MSNBC as a college-age male who was Asian, wearing a maroon cap, may have been also wearing a leather jacket. And the law enforcement is not willing to talk about the motive, but he did go to 2 different places this morning, which may tell us something about what he might have been trying to achieve. First at a dormitory at 7:15 in the morning, where students describe after that shooting took place that they were notified to stay in their rooms, stay away from the windows, and then 2 hours later when he showed up all the way across campus at Norris Hall. And that's where Derek Odell was this morning in a classroom. He said he was a sophomore biology major, and that he came in and started firing off, the suspect came in and started firing off a number of rounds, that his professor may have been shot. He was shot in the bicep, that they had to barricade the door to try and get to keep the gunman out. And that happened at around 9:15 this morning. The university tried emailing out using the internet to notify other students to stay in their rooms. There was lockdown. There were evacuations underway. At this point, again, to clarify, the campus is secure.
Right, but semi-automatic weapons, depending on the type of semi-automatic weapon you have, you can get 15 to 20 rounds. So it's pretty easy to have a large number of people shot if you have the right type of semi-automatic handgun.
And again, Pierre reporting at least 29 dead. He getting that from a number of sources, and also there were many people wounded on the Virginia Tech campus as well. The president of Virginia Tech said this is a tragedy that we consider of monumental proportions. Everyone on the campus shocked and indeed horrified by what has happened today. And there is also a statement from the governor of Virginia, Governor Timothy Kane. It is difficult to comprehend senseless violence on this scale. But just to recap, 29 dead, it could be up to 32, a number of people injured. Police on the Virginia Tech campus believe that the shooter took his own life, and the campus is now secure. Students are being allowed to go home. And indeed, there is classes canceled on the Virginia Tech campus. The campus will be closed for at least today. Class is closed for a couple of days, and there will be a convocation on the campus. Obviously, people needing there to deal with grief. But if these numbers are correct, as I said, this will be the deadliest mass shooting in the history of this country, and certainly the worst on any campus in this country. So we're going to take you back to regular programming at this point. We'll have a full wrap-up later on World News, and for continuing coverage, you can go to our website, abcnews.com, and our 24-hour news network, ABC News Now. I'm Charles Gibson in New York. Good day.
And you can see there, he's looking at police. It appears to be getting ready to either go inside one of those buildings or staging. Again, another officers on there, a couple of these pictures. This is again from Andrew Robb. He is a Virginia Tech student. He said that these photos were taken from Cochran Hall. Cochran Hall looks at West Ambler Johnston Hall, which is where one of the first shooting was actually the 911 calls came from there. So you see police officers checking out people going into the dorm, we're told, and police made everyone remove their backpacks, bags, and what have you before entering the dorm. The next one is from Jason Joseph. He is also a student at Virginia Tech, and he says these photos were taken of police with guns drawn, police cars on the Virginia Tech campus. The photos were taken from Lee Hall. Imagine that. You go to school, you expect to see students, some faculty, staff, maybe the campus police every once in a while, but nothing like this. Ryan Adcock, another CNN Eye reporter and Virginia Tech student, says cops on Virginia Tech campus near Miles Hall. So this is what students awoke to this morning, 7:15. Either the sound of gunshots or police sirens racing towards their building and then getting on the PA system telling them to stay in place, in order to stay in place until further notice from campus police. So that's the very latest that's happening now. 22 people dead on the Virginia Tech campus in Virginia here in the United States. At least 21 injured. Some reports from our affiliates, WSLS we saw there said 28. CNN has not confirmed that, but we have at least 21 people who have been hurt, 22 people killed on the campus there.
And as we were mentioning,
and those are from our reporters.
Yeah, the deadly shooting on a university campus in U.S. history. And I'm getting this note from Jim Clancy from our international desk that 7.5% of the 27,000 students are outside of the U.S. So there are many international students, as we do want to welcome our international viewers. Almost half of them are from India and China who attend Virginia Tech. And the latest statement from the university that we are getting word of is that families wishing to reunite with students are suggested to meet at the inn at Virginia Tech. The university is planning a convocation, as we've been saying, tomorrow at noon at Cassell Coliseum, and the community, the entire community, is invited to come. The gunshots, though, as we talk about what happened there on campus today, they sent students running for shelter and sent police swarming into the sprawling campus. Students, well, they've described a scene of utter terror and panic to CNN, and this took place just a little bit earlier. Take a listen.
She was just saying that it was basically mass chaos going on over there. She wasn't able to really, she could only talk to students. None of the police officers or school officials would really talk to her. One of our other reporters actually lives in West Ambler, Johnston, so she was there this morning and was getting student reactions from inside West AJ when it was happening.
All right, let's talk about, let's back up again. Let's talk about mass chaos. How did that reporter describe it?
She was just saying there are obviously lots of students running around, going crazy, and the police officers were trying to, settle everyone down and keep everything under control. But I mean, of course, students are going to be running around when they hear gunshots, and then there's ambulances and fire trucks all over campus. So she said it was just crazy. There were a lot of rumors going around and saying what they heard, what they didn't hear. I know. One of the injuries actually happened from a student jumping out of a window in AJ trying to get out, and that's how one of the injuries happened. So people inside the building were trying to get out as well.
A guy named Jamal was on the other side of Norris, kind of like maybe the shots were on that side of the building, and McBride is on the opposite side from that.
Okay, so you're in the middle of your class, you're about, or almost towards the end of your class, you're about to leave, and you get this email. You don't hear anything on the PA system, do you?
We didn't hear anything immediately. The first thing we knew was this guy just had a PDA in his hand, and he got this email. And then we were standing there at the steps. And that's when all the cops started showing up with all the guns, and then they started making noise or calls over the megaphones and whatnot outside. Mm-hmm. It was really windy outside. It was really hard to hear much of anything going on out there.
So did you go back into the building, or did you head for your car and try to get away from this?
We figured out that the building was on lockdown. They weren't letting anybody out. So all of us just standing in McBride there.
So you're standing in. How long before they let you out?
Well, I don't know if there was an actual time when we could have gotten out. It seemed like a lot of people left the building while we were standing there. Eventually, it was probably 11:15, 11:30. We were in a classroom just watching the news, and a bunch of cops came upstairs. We were on the second floor. They came up with assault rifles and everything, and they told us at that point that there had actually been a bomb threat on some building. They didn't say which building.
Now,
And,
if you're in the building right next to Norris, and you're in engineering, did you know any of these people who were involved in the shooting? Anyone hurt?
I don't know of anyone that I know that was hurt. I have a professor in ESM. I've tried to email him and see if he's okay, and he hasn't gotten back. But I don't know anything about anything.
And nothing about the gunman, I would presume.
Nothing about the gunman.
Yeah. Were you there? Tell us about last week. I think late last week they said that there were some sort of bomb threats and what have you on the campus.
Yeah, I was trying to go in Torgerson Hall last week at some point, and there was a bomb threat on Torgerson, and then apparently, I guess that must have been Tuesday or Wednesday or so, and then on Friday apparently there was another bomb threat on Torgerson, Durham, and some other hall, maybe McBride, all three of those together. So then they sent out an email saying there's a $5,000 reward for anybody that could provide any information on that.
Okay, so tell me this, Jason. You are on campus. I imagine that whatever happenings, things are going on campus, you get them by email now on campus. Do you hear much about bomb threats, or you may be looking for someone who may have assaulted somebody or someone who's been robbing? This is how you get the information usually by email?
Yeah, pretty much. If it's something that they'll cancel classes for, then they send out an email and say, class is canceled, this is why.
So it's not normal for you to get bomb threat email, correct?
No,
okay.
I wouldn't consider
All right, so you get this on Friday, and then you have this today. Take us back to the first day of classes in August. You have a shooting on your campus again.
It's ridiculous. I mean, this doesn't happen, and here, I'm in disbelief. They say this is the biggest university shooting ever to happen in the history of the United States, and it's kind of hard to take in, I was 20 yards away from this building when it happened, sitting in class, learning about heat transfer, and then I walk out and there's been the hugest university shooting in United States history. It's still kind of sinking in.
Yeah, I imagine it's kind of surreal for you. People may say you're laughing, but usually when folks are nervous or they can't believe things, that's a normal reaction. Hey, real quick before you go, any changes in security? Any procedures on campus since that thing happened in August? Between August and now, Jason?
That was kind of a fluke thing. I mean, that guy escaped from jail, and at the time, I remember everybody was freaking out. I was actually working at Papa John's. I was delivering pizzas that day, and everybody was, I'd go, people would order a pizza, and I'd go knock on the door, and they'd answer the door like scared rabbits, like they thought I was coming to shoot them. But I don't think that guy he wasn't looking to hurt anybody. He was just trying to get away, and he shot police officers, which was really a big mistake on his part, but he was just trying to be free. He wasn't like a madman on the loose gunning people down.
Yeah. Well, you can.
Yeah. What happened today was ridiculous, and I don't know what happened or what was going through this guy's mind, but I'm pretty outraged, and I'll say on the record, I'm pretty outraged that someone died in a shooting in a dorm at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the first email about it, no mention of locking down campus, no mention of canceling classes. They just mentioned that they're investigating a shooting 2 hours later at 9:26.
Yeah.
That's pretty ridiculous. And meanwhile, while they sent out that email, 21 people got killed.
Well, Jason Pyatt, a junior who was in the building right next to the one where the shooting happened, thank you so much. And at this point, we're trying to figure out exactly what did happen. We don't know what the notification procedures were. That will all be figured out as the days and the minutes tick on here. But again, 22 people
dead.
That we know
at
of.
At
least 22. And you heard Jason Pyatt say it is the worst campus shooting in U.S. history happening this morning on the Virginia Tech campus.
And some 29 people injured at this hour. Of course, those numbers can change as more information is coming in to CNN. But we do want to take you back to that moment where the shots rang out on the campus of Virginia Tech. This is some of the best video that we have into CNN to get you to the scene of the crime when it was occurring. I want you to take a listen and just watch this video play out. It is from our reporter Jamal Alberguti.
The gunman, David, was he saying anything according to these students?
I don't know about that. I don't know if he was saying anything at all, but I just knew that he came in that one classroom and he was just trying to shoot everybody, and he was going into every single classroom
as he walked down the hallway and was trying to get into the rooms and shoot students.
We're trying to figure out the fact from the storyline here, too. And what we were told, David, is that he was looking for his girlfriend. Was that a possibility based on the conversations you had with your classmates?
Yeah, I think it's a possibility.
Now, was she in that building, do you know?
I have no idea. I mean, I felt like this morning when he was over at West Ambler Johnston, if the police confirmed that it was the same person, I felt like that could have maybe been like an act of jealousy or whatever, and maybe he was going to find her later on in the afternoon in Norris, but I don't know for a fact if like it was his girlfriend or I don't know those details.
David, thank you for your time. David Jenkins is a junior at Virginia Tech, and this will be the first of countless stories recalling what happened inside there. 32 students dead, and perhaps, unfortunately, the number may change again, Jane.
And we should point out, Bill, too, that earlier today there was word that possibly at least one professor was in that death toll, so we don't know if it's all 32 or all students. There may be some faculty or staff members as well. We're waiting to get more confirmation on identities. I'm joined now by former FBI Assistant Director in charge for New York, Bill Gavin, is with us, a familiar face here at Fox. Bill, good to see you. Those details that David Jenkins has been hearing from people on campus were pretty startling. Your thoughts as to what in the world went on today and what would have driven somebody to do this?
This is such a scary set of circumstances and the worst shooting in the history of the United States. You know, when I look at the timeline, Jane, I think that there's a strong possibility that if he had a specific person in mind, I hear it's girlfriend, but whatever. If he had a specific person in mind, he knew where that person lived, what dormitory, went there and couldn't find that person. The delay in the time frame between that and the shooting in the classroom building could very well have been due to the fact that he knew what the schedule was of the specific person he had in mind and knew where that person would be, so didn't go there until it was scheduled, that person was scheduled to be in class. That's always a possibility. Yeah. But in the mind of this person, it was just, he just went crazy.
You know, in terms of that timeline, I guess that 2 hours has been really confusing. We haven't gotten a ton of information from the university at this point. They said the call came in about the 7 o'clock hour in this dormitory. One person was killed there. And then the students weren't necessarily told that the whole campus was on lockdown. They were kind of warned about what was called in an email an unfortunate incident. And then about 2 hours later, this just slaughter at this Norris Hall, this engineering building. I mean, I guess it's a bit confusing looking at it. How do you view that 2 hour timeline?
Really, the 2 hour timeline could very well have been that he laid low until he knew the individual he was looking for was going to be in class, and then went into that building to shoot that person. But the carnage that he caused, just clicking and killing everybody in there, and his ability to take those weapons into the school is surprising. I don't know what kind of facility it is, what kind of a lockdown they have, what kind of an access code they have. But you know, if he could take 6 clips of 9mm magazines that go into a 9mm gun, and if they have 15 rounds apiece, he's got 90 rounds right there, and that's not going to take up a lot of room. And walking into a class like that, or walking into a building like that with a computer bag or a briefcase or some such thing, would be perfectly normal and not anything to set off an alarm.
One of the students we interviewed earlier today, you know, pointed out anybody could tuck something like that into a backpack, probably of a decent size, and wouldn't be noticed walking around. Phil, I wanted to ask you too about these bomb threats that had been on campus. It looks to me anyway, from doing some research, there was one on April 2nd, and some buildings were evacuated. Also, just most recently on April 13th, and Virginia Tech had been offering a $5,000 reward for information leading to arrest and conviction of somebody responsible. At least one of them was a written bomb threat. I assume as investigators are looking at this going forward that they would be looking pretty hard at those bomb threats?
They will be looking, Jane, to see if there's any connection, any nexus between those incidents, the bomb threat incidents, and this carnage today. They'll look at all of those kinds of things. But it's just incomprehensible that something this horrid can occur, and that one individual human being could do something like this to other people.
And you know, explain, Bill, when it's a scene like this, and campus police, they know the place better than anybody, so they were there when they got the call. But just how much confusion there may have been. We saw the videotape at the top of the hour. Maybe we can play it again underneath you. You can hear those shots ringing out, and I believe this is outside of this Norris Hall, the engineering building. Explain, if you will, what the confusion must have been like for them when they're approaching that scene, not knowing what was going on inside, you know, a fair-sized building, and also confusion in being able to attend to the wounded victims inside.
Absolutely. When you have a dynamic event like this where officers are may be under fire and appear to be under fire, they can hear the rounds of ammunition being expended. They already have a shooting scene in one other building on campus, and now they're called to another scene where there is some real carnage going on. It is very, very difficult for these people. I just take my hat off to the law enforcement on the scene, the campus police, because they have to be trained so well not to overreact to a situation, because in a situation like this, some individuals could be hurt by friendly fire. That's always a possibility, but it sounds to me like they did, in fact, retaliate to the force that was being expended by this shooter, and in fact, take his life as well.
All right, Bill, if you will stay with us, Bill Hemmer here is just going to get to some interviews from people on campus.
We just heard from that junior on campus there, Jane, and Bill Salmon, who's a Fox News contributor, has at least 2 of his kids who go to school at Virginia Tech. When he was on air earlier today, he said he thought he was sending his kids away to a quiet campus in a quiet part of Virginia, western side of the state, at the base of the Shenandoah Valley there. But Blacksburg, Virginia today is the scene of a stunning outbreak. At least 32 are dead, and you can bet reaction will continue for several weeks to come, if not beyond that. Here is what we're starting to gather from the university there. Listen to a few students talk about their experience earlier today.
I don't understand why they would do something like this. It seems really senseless, and it's really hard to just think about it. Why, all these people have to die for no reason, sort of.
It's insane. Just thinking back to Columbine and stuff like that, the shooting at the Amish school in Pennsylvania. It's just utter shock how anybody could do this to anybody else, and just being here. I don't know. It's crazy to me.
This is something that no one will ever get over. I mean, the people who died, yes, they've finished their pain, but the pain for everybody else go on forever.
That's just insane. That's such a big number. Like we were already saying, this is just like a college Columbine. This is just really sad. It's hard. It's hard to think that there's 22 fellow students that died today, knowing that I could have been in one of those classrooms. It's shocking.
It was 8 years ago this week, the mention there, the Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. The ATF already on campus there, so the feds are involved in the investigation. They will carefully map out every bullet casing they found and retrace the steps of this gunman. Now 32 dead, and again, we warn you, the number may change throughout the day, some still being treated in critical condition at area hospitals. Jane now with more.
Yeah, Bill, we have Philip Hufstedler on the phone. Philip, I assume you can hear me. He's a grad student and was locked down, I understand, in your lab all morning. Can you tell me what went on?
You there, Jane?
Yes, I'm here, Phil. Can you tell me exactly where you were, what happened, what they told you?
I was in Hahn Hall, which is about 200 yards away from Norris Hall, and about 10:30, 11 o'clock, we started getting quite a few mass emails saying that we were not supposed to leave, that we were not supposed to go near the windows, not to look out the window or anything of that sort. Also, from a distance looking out the window, you could see that there were FBI agents all over the place. There were a few stragglers that were trying to get indoors. They were patting them down, searching them, making sure that they weren't involved with anything like this. So.
And Phil, this morning, when the first incident happened at the dormitory, you're talking about the second incident. When the first one happened, in the 7 o'clock hour, were you given any word as to what was going on campus, or that you should be careful if you were venturing out?
Well, yes, I was. My wife, Tiffany Hufstedler, gave me a phone call because she is a local teacher at Margaret Beeks Elementary School, and she had told me that there had been a shooting on campus and that I needed to be careful. I was already on my way to work, and so I just went on in, and I figured once I got there, if there was for us to go home, then they would dismiss us and make sure everything was taken care of safely.
But you didn't get any word from the school this morning, earlier?
No, there was no email until about 9:30 this morning about the first shooting.
And then what happened after you were witnessing what was happening outside Norris Hall there, that engineering building? You said it was about 200 yards away or so. Mm-hmm. What did you see, what did you witness after that, and what did you do after that?
Basically, my lab mates and I, we locked all the doors inside the building. We stayed away from the windows, and we just kind of sat around and talked and just just tried to fathom how in the world somebody could actually do something like this.
And Phil.
But this is a demonic new piece of information that he apparently, or at least they're investigating the possibility that the gunman chained the doors of the classroom building after entering to make it impossible for people to get out.
So actually the main doors of the building, not of the classroom, Pete?
Correct.
All right, Pete, thank you for that new information, which you so accurately described as a demonic and terribly upsetting, as if this isn't upsetting enough. I want to bring in Clint Van Zandt, an MSNBC analyst, former FBI profiler. And what do you make, Clint, of what you just heard from Pete?
Hi. Well, you know, Pete's obviously got his hand, got his finger on the pulse of this situation. You know, for the two weapons, and I don't want to get too much into guns here, but, you know, we've got a 9mm semi-automatic pistol that has a magazine that can hold perhaps 15 rounds and 1 round in the chamber. So that would be 16. That's a standard law enforcement weapon. It's what I carried as an FBI agent. Now Pete's reporting a 22 caliber weapon. Now remember that a 22 caliber was what was used to kill Robert Kennedy. It's also been used as a hit gun for the mob in years gone by. So up close, it's a very devastating round. Now whether that was a semi-automatic pistol also, which could hold probably 10 to 20 rounds, or a revolver in a 22, which could be 6 or 8 rounds, we don't know. I mean, these are all questions to be answered, but I guess what I get from this and from what Pete has been reporting is that to have 2 handguns, to have multiple loaded magazines so you could do a very fast reload of your weapon, to carry these guns in some type of perhaps a weight-bearing vest, almost like a typical team member would use. And now Pete's reporting to use a chain to close the door. This is someone whose anger, whose frustration, whose rage, whose desire to carry this mass execution out had been planned. It doesn't sound like anything that he just got up this morning and said, I'm going to go out and commit the worst act of mass murder ever on a college campus in the United States. This is something this young man appears to have planned. And the challenge is, of course, now, how long has this been going on? Who else knew about it? I mean, the people that are dead, the terrible thing is we cannot help them, but we can help the living, number one, in the hospital, and number two, by trying to better understand these situations and by trying to better understand at-risk behavior so that other students on other campuses can learn about this and can learn when someone exhibits this type of behavior, they need some help. If they won't get it themselves, perhaps we need to raise our hand and say, I know a guy, he's really got some problems. Somebody needs to be talking to him.
So in your experience, Clint, and what we know, and sadly we've had enough of these that we're able to look at these shooters and get some kind of profile of them, there would have been signs?
Chris, I have never seen a situation where we've had a shooter in a school or where we've had a violence in a workplace scenario where there hasn't been some type of indicators in that person's activity, his statements, what procurement of weapons, whatever it's going to be. The problem is we either miss those, we overlook them, or we don't add any value, any weight to what they're doing. And
Trey, this is Chris Jansing at MSNBC. Can you tell us what happened?
Yes, ma'am. I was in my German class this morning. I remember looking at my phone. It was about 9:40, and we started to hear some loud pops. But none of us really thought that it could have been gunshots because it wasn't really loud like that. And then a guy comes into the room. He shot our teacher, and then we all got on the ground real quick, and he started just shooting around at different people. I'm not sure how long it lasted. It felt like a really long time, but it was probably only about a minute or so. And then he finally left the room, and myself and 2 other students, one of whom is Derek Odell, who had called in earlier, and we went up to the door and put our feet against it to hold it shut in case he started to come back again. And he started to try to open the door again and then started to shoot through the door, probably 4, 5, maybe 6 shots. Fortunately, none of those shots hit anyone, and he finally stopped trying to get in the room.
and I guess continued on to other rooms because we kept hearing shots. And after that, I just went around and tried to help people that were shot, just with like taking off my sweatshirt and just trying to stop any bleeding that I could, and just doing anything that I could to help people.
Prior to today's shooting, several bomb threats were made on the campus over the last 2 weeks. Students told CNN that 2 of those threats were aimed specifically at the Science and Engineering School. No link to the shootings, however, has been determined at this time. But it's not the first incident on the campus this school year. The first day of classes last fall was canceled when the school shut down while law enforcement searched for an armed escaped convict suspected of killing a hospital guard and a sheriff's deputy. That suspect was eventually captured on an off-campus trail. But these kinds of things tend to have a cumulative effect. And students on campus today who were around last fall may have second thoughts about whether they want to continue attending Virginia Tech. Here's the question then. What impact will the Virginia Tech shootings have, do you think, on future enrollment at that school? It's one of the best engineering schools in the country. Email your thoughts to CaffertyFile@CNN.com or go to CNN.com/CaffertyFile. Wolf.
Jack, when you heard about it, earlier today, what was the first thing that went through your mind?
2 things. When these things happen in this country, they tend to happen at schools. If you look back at the history of these mass killings from was it University of Texas back in Austin years ago to Columbine, they happen on school campuses. And the other thing that occurred to me is that we seem in this country to have a copyright on this kind of violence. I don't recall being able to spin back through my mind quickly and come up with a half a dozen mass shootings in other countries in the last 25, 30 years. They seem to happen in the United States, and they seem to happen on school property. And I don't understand why either of those things is the case, but that seems to be the history of these.
Jack.
Let's listen in on this presser going right now at Virginia Tech.
Information on that will be available on our website if it is not already available. And again, we expect them to arrive momentarily.
Okay, the school is just sort of, they're previewing the presser that a lot of updates have been added on the school website, although I've not seen a heck of a lot. But anyway, joining me now on the phone is Virginia Tech sophomore Leah Burden. Leah, how are you holding up?
I'm doing okay. It's rough, but I mean, I'm all right.
Yeah, I bet. Let me ask you, Leah, and I hate to be the inquisitor here with all you've been through, but when did you first hear about the first shootings?
I heard about it around 10:40 this morning when I was actually walking out my door to go to class.
And then what did you do?
My friend who goes to another college in another state actually IM'd me, and I looked at my computer and saw it. And I don't talk to her all the time. She's an old friend from school, and so I looked at it because I thought it was odd that she was IMing me at that time. And she said, Leah, I just wanted to make sure that you're okay. I heard about the shootings going on at Tech. And I was like, what are you talking about? And so I checked my email, and there were 3 emails from the university. The first one was just saying that there was a shooting on campus. The second one was letting us know that the campus was on lockdown or something, and then the third one said that campus was closed and not to go anywhere.
All right. Leah, it looks like this press conference will start, but thank you, Leah, very much. You hang in there. You'll be in our prayers, all right? Thank you very much. All right, Leah Burden, as we're getting ready for this to begin, I want to go to Dr. Michael Wellner. He's a forensic psychiatrist who analyzes these types of cases, and clinical psychologist, Dr. Jeffrey Gardier. Jeff, to you first. What do you want to hear out of this presser?
Well, what I want to hear is who actually has been injured, if it's possible to at least help these parents get some sort of identification. What is the system? What's going on? And what have they done for the students right now? We know everything they haven't done, but what have they done? Have they been able to stabilize the kids? Are they warm? Are they eating? Are they able to know that they're secure, that the whole area has been locked down? But it really is about the communication right now.
All right. How would you handle it, Michael?
I agree with what Dr. Gardira is saying. What is the purpose of a press conference? The most important focus is not the national community, it's the Virginia Tech community, because that is where the zone of trauma is. That is where all of the anxious parents who may or may not have lost someone, where all of the traumatic and confused, and we heard a very disoriented, kind of shocked student a couple of calls ago. People have to be grounded. There has to be some established sense of order.
Well,
Whom do I speak to?
it doesn't look like there's a lot of order. And if I'm hearing from a dad who lost his son at Columbine correctly, there's a distinct possibility that of the 31 kids who were killed, leaving out the shooter, their parents might not have been notified.
Sure, but I don't find that surprising, and I want to perhaps be a different voice here. I wouldn't at all be surprised if Columbine was an inspiration for this, and those of us familiar with Columbine recognize that it was a catastrophic crime that had quite a bit of planning attached to it.
But didn't we learn anything from that as far as communication is concerned?
I just need to finish. I think we need to know exactly what this gunman or multiple gunmen had done, had planned to do, and how this scheme was undertaken, because their deception may have been part of the modus operandi.
So you think it was well planned, well thought out?
I think that if mass homicides, previous mass homicides, are any template for this, then the preparation will give us answers about why we're seeing this sense of chaos and confusion, because chaos was part of the success of the modus operandi.
You're nodding your head, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that we need to be cognizant of is just because we do have the news and we may have the communication, people are in shock right now. We heard it from those kids. You've done a fantastic job interviewing them, but doing it in a very subtle way, because they're not even in reality. They can't believe what has happened. And so this is the overwhelming sense in that community right now at the school, where people just can't believe it. They're still going out to eat. They're still interacting.
Well, see, that's what I want. And you're quite right, Michael. You know, who are we to second guess it? We don't know the facts, but we do know this much, that the first shootings occurred, you know, a little after 7 in the morning. And a lot of these kids, and we're hearing, you've heard them, to a man and woman saying, we weren't formally notified until an hour and a half to 2 hours later, by which time the gunman, if this timeline is correct, was already in Norris Hall, killing a lot more people. So something is wrong there, right, with the communication process.
Oh, absolutely. But I think, again, it is the sense that even though something really heinous was going on and there wasn't the leadership, I would believe, I don't know, who might be, they don't know where to go. They don't know what to say, because even though there was something that was somewhat similar happening 8 months before, they're still not in the reality that this can happen again.
Look, guys, I don't want to interrupt you, but Charles Steger is the gentleman in the natty jacket here, making his way to the podium. He is the president of Virginia Tech. Obviously, a very difficult day for him, and he has, as they say, a lot of explaining to do. Let's hear him.
Where's the secretary?
Hear from Charles Steger to outline exactly what happened, what was the sequence of events, how could this communication, at least early in the morning, have gotten screwed up, if it's indeed to have gotten screwed up. I misidentified. I thought this was Steger, but let's listen.
Vice President for University Relations. We will begin this briefing with a statement, a short statement by President Charles Steger. After that, all the individuals with me will be available for a comment. President Steger will identify them in his opening comments. We will stay here as long as you need. We will stay here as long as you need for us to stay here. And then afterwards, I will be available for comment. Obviously, there's an awful lot of you and there's one of me, so I would recommend that we try to get as much as we can accomplished in this press briefing today. President Charles Steger, President of Virginia Tech.
Thank you, Larry. Let me note to you all that just a few minutes ago I spoke with President Bush, and he conveyed his concern and condolences from everyone in Washington and offered all the help that they could possibly provide. I've also spoken on 2 occasions today with Governor Kane, who is coming back from Tokyo to be at the convocation tomorrow, and he has declared a state of emergency, which enables us to access significant other assets that may be required in dealing with this tragedy. With me today is the Secretary of Public Service for the Commonwealth of Virginia, John Marshall, and the Superintendent of the Virginia State Police, Colonel Steve Flaherty. Also present is the Mayor of Blacksburg, Ron Warden, the Chief of the Blacksburg Police Department, Kim Crannis, and the Chief of the Virginia Tech Police, Wendel Flincher. I want to repeat my horror and disbelief and profound sorrow at the events of today. People from around the world have expressed their shock and their sorrow and endless sadness that has transpired. I'm really at a loss for words to explain or to understand the carnage that has visited our campus. I know no other way to speak about this than to tell you what we know, and let me do that now. It is now confirmed that we have 31 deaths from the Norris Hall, including the gunman. 15 other victims are being treated at local hospitals in the Roanoke and New River valleys. There are 2 confirmed deaths from the shooting in Ambler, Johnston Dormitory, in addition to the 31 at Norris Hall. We have not confirmed the identity of the gunman because he carried no identification on his person, and we are in the process of attempting that identification. Norris Hall is a tragic and a sorrowful crime scene, and we are in the process of identifying victims and in the process of notifying next of kin. This may take some time. We will not release any names until we are positive of this notification. We anticipate being able to release a list sometime tomorrow. We're asking our students to contact their parents and let them know of their status. Our investigation continues into whether there is a connection between the first and second incidents, and that has not been decided. We know that parents will want to embrace their children. We're not suggesting that you come to campus. However, if parents feel that they must come to campus, we are locating counselors at the end of Virginia Tech, which is this building you're in now, to be available. Now, as you can imagine, security, investigation, operational, and counseling resources are very taxed at this moment. However, we're getting assistance from the state police, the FBI, the ATF, local jurisdictions, and the Red Cross. And we understand the desire, indeed the compelling need, to get information on the part of families, students, and loved ones. But unfortunately, this is all the information that we can verify at this point in time. We're posting information on our website as we learn it. Our communication systems are taxed. Also, we're also posting information on the website for the state police, which is vsp.virginia.gov. I think we're ready to take questions.
President Steger?
Yes, ma'am.
Why not shut down campus after the first shooting, whether they're connected or not? Couldn't some of those deaths been prevented if classes had been shut down earlier?
I'll let Chief Fletcher respond to that.
The information we had on the first incident led us to make the decision that it was an isolated event to that building, and the decision was made not to cancel classes at that time.
Why were the students, can you say why the students weren't notified for 2 hours that there had been a shooting on campus?
Well, they were notified that there was a shooting. But you have to remember that of the about 26,000 students that we have here, only 9,000 are on campus. And when classes start at 8 a.m., thousands of people are already in transit. So the question is, where do you keep them where it is most safe? And we concluded first that the incident in the Ambler Johnston was domestic in nature. In fact, we had some reason to think the shooter had left the campus, in fact, may have been leaving the state. And this other event occurred 2 hours later. So,
well, the first blast email didn't arrive to students till 9:26.
Well, that's when we were able to confirm. The call came in to the 911 center at 7:15. I don't know when the police got there. It was about 5 or 10 minutes later.
Very sad.
Then we interviewed witnesses to try to find out what was going on and then decide what the best course of action was to do.
What led you to believe the shooter had in fact left the campus and possibly the state?
We had information from witnesses and the evidence at the scene that led us to believe the shooter was no longer in the building and more than likely off campus.
More than likely, why?
I'm not going to release that at this time.
Can you tell us if you believe that the shooter was in fact a student here?
From the first incident, we do not know at this point.
From either incident?
We do not know at this point. We have one person that's deceased in Norris Hall that was a shooter. We do not know if the two incidents are connected. That's part of the investigation that we're looking into, and we're trying to determine whether they are or are not related.
Are you looking for something?
At this time, we are not looking for someone. We are continuing to investigate, talk to witnesses, and going from there.
What weapons have been recovered?
I'm not prepared to release that at this time.
President Steger, I'm representing Radford University Forest Server. Our campus is 15 minutes down the road, and we felt the shock and condolences for you guys. Right. How can campuses across the nation better prepare for this situation? I understand there wasn't a level of security, in the classroom, even in the building. How 15 minutes down the road, how are we supposed to head off this kind of trouble in the future?
Well, it's very difficult because we are an open society and an open campus, and we have over 26,000 people here and hundreds of buildings. And I think the best thing we can do is we ask people to report anything they saw that was suspicious, but we obviously can't have an armed guard in front of every classroom every day of the year. So,
will you have meetings in the future, or I'm sure you'll have meetings following this?
After every incident, we do a complete review of how it was handled, how we can make improvements, as we did with the Morva situation in the fall. But it's one of these things that no one anticipated, and you have to remember that you can only make the decision based on the information you know at that moment in time, and you don't have hours to reflect on it. You have to take immediate action.
Do we have any reason to believe that the bomb threats, including the one on Friday, are connected to this at all?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. We're looking into that to see if they are or are not connected. It's certainly a possibility that we're exploring.
Can you give us any details?
The gunman took his own life.
Can you give us any details about what happened first in the dorm and then later in Norris Hall? Because I think rumors are rampant about what actually transpired.
Officers responded to the dormitory, West Ambler, Johnston. They found 2 people had been shot. We started our investigation from that point, interviewing witnesses. We were on scene at that time when the second incident happened.
Were they found dead at the scene?
Both people were transported to the hospital from the scene.
Were they shot in a room, a student's room, an RA's room?
They were shot in a dormitory room.
You said it was domestic in nature. Can you elaborate on that?
No, I didn't say it was domestic in nature. Initial information we were getting led us to believe that it could have been, and that's one of the possibilities we were exploring at that time.
Was one of the dead the shooter's girlfriend?
I'm sorry,
Is one of the deceased from that first shooting the shooter's girlfriend?
I do not think so.
Can you tell us how many of the dead are students and how many might be faculty or other staff?
We do not have those numbers yet.
Was there any shootout between the shootings on campus and another shooting off campus at an apartment? ABC News was reporting an apartment shooting prior to the first shooting at West AJ.
I'm not aware of any shootings off campus.
Was there a shootout involving officers and the gunman? And were you in a situation where you had to decide when to send officers into the building?
There was not a shootout between the officers and the gunman. Officers went in immediately upon arriving at the building.
Did you at any point tell the suspect to get on the ground?
I do not know.
How would you characterize these shootings? Was he running through hallways and into classrooms pulling the trigger, or did, as we've heard, did he execute these students?
We're still preliminary into the investigation, and I'm not prepared to release that at this time.
How many weapons did he have?
Shootings, or were they specific?
I'm sorry. Let me go to this gentleman. I'll be right back.
How many weapons did he have?
I'm not prepared to release that this time either.
Let me,
the lady in the back.
let me get back to your question about closing the campus. When the shooting occurred at Ambler Johnston, that building was closed immediately. And we thought we would be able, if someone were leaving or whatever. So that's a point I didn't make.
So you thought the situation was under control and...
Well, as best we could, yeah.
Excuse me. What? Choose next.
There were reports that the shooter had locked himself in the building at Norris Hall. Is that accurate? That had locked not, or she's not allowing officers to come in. I mean, is that accurate or no?
We're still interviewing the witnesses to determine exactly what happened.
Were the doors
Where did
chained
the
when you
shooter
arrived?
shoot himself? What location did the shooter die?
Inside of Norris Hall.
Is there any indication why he was shooting at Norris Hall at that particular place?
Not yet.
Were all of the bodies found in one room in Norris Hall, or were they found throughout that building?
Different locations.
Were the doors to Norris Hall chained when you arrived? So that you could not get in and people could not get out?
From preliminary reports, and I haven't been able to confirm, that yes, some of the doors were chained.
Was the shooter a young man or was he older?
We do not know who he is yet, so
I know you don't know who he is, but what age did he appear?
I do not know.
Do you have different locations that you, I mean, how many murder scenes are you dealing with here? How many locations? They're shot in different parts of the building.
I don't have the answer for that. To me, it's all one tragic location.
Were all of the shootings in Norris on the second floor?
I do not have the answer for that either.
Are all of the victims still inside Norris or still inside AJ?
All the
deceased victims, are they still inside the location at the crime scene?
some of them are still at Norris Hall, yes.
And also, if one is deceased and you're not looking for anyone at this time, is there anyone in custody right now that you believe could have been a secondary shooter?
There is no one in custody at this time.
Was anybody arrested after the first shooting? Did you have any arrests?
No one was arrested after the first shooting.
Or after the second? Did you have any arrests?
No, ma'am.
Can we go back to the first scene of the shooting and what the thinking was at that time and some of the process you thought in terms of your decision-making at that point?
We knew we had two people shot. We were acting on the information we had at the time. We secured the building. We secured the crime scene. We had information that led us to believe that the building was secure and that the person had left the building.
Well, at that point then, when the person left the building, what was the process going on with your force then?
Our force, in conjunction with Blacksburg, Montgomery County State Police, were following up leads, and we were looking for a person of interest at that time.
And who was the lead investigative agency? Is it your agency then that was calling the shots?
That's correct.
If you don't believe that you can't automatically link the two shootings, then you're actively looking for a suspect in the first shootings?
We were actively working the investigation to determine whether the two are or are not related.
You are?
We are.
Was there any opposition by the police, the students, to the shooter? I mean, it seems to me like if I was in the room, somebody was shooting, I would tackle the person. Yeah, if I was going to die, I might as well do it fighting. Was there anything like that went on?
Again, we're still interviewing witnesses to try to determine exactly what happened.
Chief, dealing with the doors that were chained, were they chained from the inside or the outside?
Inside.
Was the shooter surrounded by officers when he took his life?
I do not know exactly that answer.
Does the university ever chain doors in buildings, or is that unusual?
No, that is unusual.
Were the chains already on the doors, or is it something that the shooter brought in?
I do not know.
In between the time of the two shootings, there was a space of about 2 hours. Did you hear any reports of anything suspicious happening?
No.
So it went from point A to point B.
That's correct.
And what was your reaction when you heard about the second series of shootings?
Dismay. And this is a tragic event. I can't express how much sorrow I feel for the families and everyone involved in this incident. But we're doing everything we can to bring this investigation to a successful conclusion, find out all the facts, and go from there.
Do you feel like a lockdown would have been helpful after the first one, or do you feel like it would have been too hard to get a lockdown going on and everyone alerted?
You know, you can second guess all day. We acted on the best information we had at the time.
In the first shooting, we hear two victims. We've heard that one of the victims is a resident, an RA. Can you confirm that?
I really don't know if the family has been notified, so I'd rather not comment on that.
At what point were other jurisdictions contacted as far as the investigation goes?
Immediately.
What kind of weapons were used?
President Stewart,
Yeah.
could you talk about the very difficult process of notifying these families, what that process is and how they're done?
Well, as Chief Flincher said, we are in the process now of still identifying the victims. As we do that, the police will be in touch with the families, and we will also provide some counseling. We have counseling centers open in AJ, now at 5 o'clock, and then also in the Macomb Center. We have counselors here at the end to be available to meet with some of the families that are coming here waiting for this news. And there will be other gatherings and support staff available to help anyone. This is a shock, is a mild understatement, and we're trying to do everything we can for these families.
Is there a phone number for families?
Yes, there is.
To check?
Yeah. There's a number. Larry, do you know what it is? You can.
231-3787. That's the Dean of Students Office.
Can you characterize how many witnesses there are that you are interviewing?
231-3787.
Area code
540.
Gene, can you outline your lockdown policy for the university?
Larry, do you want to talk about that?
None of which one?
The lockdown policy.
I mean, are you saying that, do we have a policy to lock down the campus?
Yeah, like when, under what circumstances do you do it? What's your time frame?
I don't, it's not in my communications plan.
I'll talk about it. I mean, obviously every situation you face is different, and we do have 9,000 students on campus and about 14,000 students off campus coming in. And then what we try to determine is, are they most kept out of harm's way by staying in the dorms or staying in the academic buildings? And the latter was the decision this morning. And so we send out communications by email. We have an emergency alert system, iMessaging, and everything else to get the word to them as quickly as we can. But with 11,000 people driving into campus, it's extremely difficult, if not almost impossible, to get the word out instantaneously.
Don't you think this has rendered the lockdown system altogether ineffective?
No, I think the lockdown system, both last fall and this time, worked very well. The students were extremely cooperative. There were very few people out about on campus.
But didn't you lock it down after the first shooting, and then 30 kids are dead now?
No, we locked down the building where we thought it occurred and when we thought the incident was contained.
I'm sorry.
We had no reason to suspect any other incident was going to occur.
What sort of changes did you make after the Morley incident?
Let me get to that. Go ahead.
What sort of changes did you make in the security after the Morley incident on the first day of school?
Well, one thing we did was to provide all of our people with their own secure communication channel. We found that people were picking up communications by scanner, putting out all kinds of rumors which are creating a sense of fear and uncertainty on the campus. So that was one of the things. But we also, as soon as we learned of what was going on in Norris Hall, with all of the police collaborating, we began a sweep from one side of the campus to the other. And in fact, we continued throughout the day and have gone through every building on the campus to verify that there are no other individuals hiding there.
What did you do differently? Did you add cameras, doors, security at all since the Morley incident?
Well, we have in the dormitories electronic access keys and whatever else, so only residents can get in and out of those things at that point in time. The classroom buildings are open pretty much all the time because we have people, particularly our graduate students who work on projects, through the middle of the night and whatever else. The main administrative buildings are locked at the end of the day, but of course hundreds of people have keys to get into them.
President Steger, how does Virginia Tech go forward? How do classes resume here? There's obviously going to be a new normal here at Virginia Tech.
Well, I think we have to think very carefully about the process of healing and bringing this community back together. We have dozens of meetings with students. We have a convocation tomorrow. Governor Kane is flying back from Tokyo to be present there. And it's going to be a long, difficult road for people to feel the same way about going on, particularly in the buildings where the shootings occurred than they did in the past.
President Steger, did you speak to President Bush earlier, and if so, yes. Tell us a little bit about your conversation.
Yes, I spoke to President Bush, and he certainly expressed his concern about the great tragedy and the fact that he and Mrs. Bush sent their condolences, and he said that any additional support or resources that we needed, he would make available. I also got a call from Attorney General Gonzalez shortly after that.
Did the students on campus begin vest?
Pardon?
Was the gunman wearing a vest?
The Gavin?
Was the gunman wearing a bulletproof vest?
I do not know.
Can you tell us whether or not it was a deliberate shooting or was it violent shooting inside Norris Hall?
Again, we're still investigating. Those facts will come out later. I'm not prepared to discuss that
You
yet.
say you interviewed some witnesses. Did you get any sense of it at all?
I personally have not done the interviews. We have teams of people that are interviewing the witnesses, and we'll put all that together as we move forward in this.
Gentlemen, the gunman did not have identification. Can you give us an approximate age and description? And also, as the president mentioned, only residents get into those dorms with their ID cards. Does that give you a sign that he could be a Virginia Tech student and living on campus?
Well, you're jumping to the conclusion that the person in Norris is the one at West AJ, and we're looking
You
at...
say you're not looking for anyone and there's no other person in
Correct, but
custody.
we need to make sure that is or is not the case. As far as the description of him, all I can tell you is he's a male.
Did you say the sweep of campus began after the first shooting?
I'm sorry.
Did the sweep of campus begin after the first shooting, and if so, why not?
No, we secured the dormitory in which the first incident happened. And again, we acted on the best information we had at the time. A lockdown policy was mentioned. We get with the senior administration at the university. We provide the best information. We make the best decision we can at the time. Based on that information, we thought that this incident was isolated to this dormitory.
Was there a lockdown?
If there's a suspect, I guess if there's a suspect at large, and you believe that he has left the campus, but it's really only your best belief, a lot of people are going to be very critical that action wasn't taken immediately after this initial shooting, that you all jumped to the conclusion it was an isolated incident, and yet a suspect is at large.
You had to remember that the classes start at 8 o'clock. The call came into the 9/11 Center at about 7:15. We've got 14,000 people en route. So the question is, where do you lock them down? Because students are already, it takes 20 minutes to walk from some parts of campus to the classrooms. So people are already in transit. So the decision was...
Did you put a bulletin over the radio?
Well, they're not listening to their radios as they're walking across campus.
Some kind of communication?
Well, we did. We had the sirens going off. We sent out iMessages. We sent out emails, and we utilized telephone tree. And we concluded it was best, once they got in the classroom, that was where to lock them down.
That was happening at 9:30 though, not 7:30, correct?
The email 9:29 a.m. There was a lapse of about 2 hours.
Well, the other incident didn't occur.
Right. The initial incident occurred at 7:15
When we closed the initial dorm, we thought that was...
I understand that you think it was an isolated incident, but there are other dormitories right around West Ambler, Johnston. Sure. And no students were notified until 9:29. There is a possibility that the gunman...
Well, we had security guards around the building almost immediately. So.
President Stinger, you spoke about grief counseling.
Yeah.
The university faces substantial grief. It would seem to me that resources really to meet that grief are going to have to be substantial. I know you probably have some frontline stuff. What kinds of steps have you taken to add more grief counseling capabilities?
Well, we are today utilizing the rather capable staff that we already have. And as we go forward and get a better sense of what specifically needs to be done, we'll make available the resources that are necessary, whatever it takes.
Has there been an emergency plan in place for an instance with an armed gunman on campus or in a building?
Yeah, we do simulations of these things on a regular basis. Of course, they're never quite like the textbook, but we do have drills looking at how we would handle these types of things.
What would it call for in a case where there was a gunman in a classroom building taking out students?
Well, we followed just that. We had people dispatched to the building immediately, armed and closing down the building and surrounding it. And they got there as quickly as they could. This is literally within minutes.
In that situation, doesn't a lockdown then expose everyone who's in that building to what the gunman does?
Well, they're already in the building, so how are you going to get them out? I mean, this all happens within a few minutes. You know, you can't just... And the building is large. That's all right. Go ahead.
Chief, you say it's presumptuous to assume that the two are connected, yet you tell us you're not looking for a suspect. There's no one in custody. There are parents of Virginia Tech students that are watching right now saying, okay, well, if the two aren't linked and you've only got one gunman dead, why aren't you looking for anyone? Why isn't anyone in custody? What do you say to those parents? What do you say to us here?
What I said was we're still actively investigating that first incident. I didn't say we weren't looking for anyone. We're actively investigating. You can take that to say that we are looking for someone. We are working very, very hard to make sure this case, both incidents are related or are not related. And that's the focus right now, is to determine that. But we are actively investigating that case.
Is Virginia Tech, and more specifically all college campuses, are they not safe anymore? 30 people's a lot of dead people.
It's a real tragedy.
What will you do to change security measures once campus reopens?
Well, I think we first have to find out all the facts about what happened, and we don't know those at this point in time. And pardon?
We're still considering whether or not to open.
Yeah, we're still thinking about that. We'll see.
What are the words of reassurance that you still have for the students that this isn't going to repeat in the future?
Well, I should say that we have done everything possible to deal with this problem, as tragic as it is. There will be significant security on the campus throughout the evening. The campus has been blocked off. There's no traffic going in and out. And we'll look at additional procedures that we need to employ in the future. But at this point in time, we are focusing on dealing with the tremendous grief that these families are facing. That's where we're putting our energy. We'll look at how we can improve after the immediate crisis
In
is over.
hindsight, you talk a lot about on hindsight. On hindsight, what could have been done differently and what could have been avoided if it had been done differently? Just some scenarios. What could have been some different scenarios to avoid the second shooting?
Until we know all the facts of both incidents, it's going to take some time to figure out exactly what happened, what could have prevented it, if anything. And that's what we'll do. Once we have all the investigations completed, we will certainly look at that and make determinations from there.
Can you describe the security in the buildings, the academic building, the dorm building? How does one get into those buildings?
I didn't hear the first part
Can
of
you
the question.
describe security in those buildings? Do you need like a swipe card to get in the dorm building? And what time? How does that work basically for both buildings, the academic and dorm?
The academic buildings are open access.
Is what?
Open access.
Open access all the time?
Yes. Well, they're locked at a certain hour at night, but during the day it's open access.
So the dorms are locked during the day. You can only get a key card in there.
I'm not sure if that's during the day or not.
It starts in
That's an important thing to know.
It starts.
Does anyone hear you?
I'm sorry.
How many grief counts?
Let me answer his question first. The swipe cards in the dormitories start in the evenings, and then they go off in the mornings.
What time?
Around 7.
They go off around 7 a.m.?
What do they know what students have to see?
We are, as soon as we get the positive notifications, we're in the process of notifying them. I think some will be notified very shortly.
How many families have you contacted?
How can we help those families and be with them? Even ask.
Well, once we have the list complete, we will make it public. But we're waiting until we have all the names.
Chief Flincher, what time was the Norris Hall shooting? What time frame did that start? When did you get your first 911 calls from that?
Approximately 9:40 a.m.
Did you find the shooting victim in there by themselves when you got there? We left at 7:15. Was there the victim, the body in the dorm room?
There were 2 victims in the dormitory room.
So there were 2, you found 2 dead in the dormitory room?
No, ma'am. We found 2 victims in the dormitory room.
Do you know if they survived? I know that we were transported to a hospital in
Both victims in West Ambler, Johnston are deceased. I'm not prepared to release that at this time.
How many classrooms?
At 9:40. What clock did the email go out at 9:20 something? Is that a delay
I don't have the
Yeah,
answer.
there was, the first email that went out was in relation to the first shooting.
Why did that take so long?
Well, again, the call came into 911 at 7:15. You got to have time for the police to get there. Then they were interviewing witnesses who were trying to figure out what we knew about what happened. And then you had to make the decision about canceling classes and all that. So by the time you go through all of that, it takes a little time. We sent out, 36,000 emails at once.
In retrospect, though, do you feel like it would have been a good idea to send out that email sooner?
Based on, we have to make the decision based on what we know at the time, and I think we did it as well as we could.
How many classrooms were attacked?
I don't have the exact number. We're still investigating that, and at future press conferences, I'll be able to release more information.
Is AJ a co-ed dorm, and were the victims male or female?
There was one female victim and one male victim.
Can you describe Norris Hall, the types, what kind of classes are held there?
To my knowledge, it's general classes.
General, it's not just engineering. We heard a lot of engineering offices are in that building.
There are a lot of engineering offices, but I believe the classrooms are general classrooms.
We understand a lot of the injuries were from students leaping from windows. I believe this was on the second floor, and that there were a lot of broken bones and whatnot. Is that what you gentlemen have heard as well?
There were, I'm aware of, a couple of people that did jump out of a window out of that building.
And any faculty, John? Can you say whether any faculty?
I don't know at this point. I believe there was, but I'm not positive on that.
Can you tell us how many faculty are among the dead?
I don't have the answer for that.
When you talk to witnesses, what was their general feeling about this? Did they give you sort of a general sort of tick-tock about how this happened, what their emotions were? What was it like for them?
Again, I personally have not spoken to witnesses. We have the investigative teams doing that.
You mentioned 15 victims being treated now. Does that include people that jumped out of those buildings, or is that people that have been shot in the shooting?
Both.
So a total of 15, including people that jumped and people that were shot.
That's correct.
Has this required extra board services for this region?
For the record, my name is Larry Hinker. I'm Associate Vice President for University Relations. We've been assembled trying to reconstruct a timeline to address as many of the questions that you all had earlier. President Steger will speak from that timeline. I'm trying to have copies made for it. I'll also have it posted just as quickly as possible on our website. And then immediately after President Steger speaks, then we'll take questions from the Chief of Police and the President and anybody else up here who you may wish to speak to.
Well, thank you, Larry. I'm going to just go through the timeline because I know it was the subject of some discussion earlier. At 7:15 a.m., Virginia Tech Police receive a 911 call to respond to a dormitory room at West Ambler Johnston Residence Hall. Within minutes, Virginia Tech Police and the Virginia Tech Rescue Squad respond to find 2 gunshot victims, a male and a female, inside a dormitory room within the hall. The residence hall was immediately secured by the Virginia Tech Police Department, and students within the hall were notified and asked to remain in their rooms for their safety. Virginia Tech Police immediately secured the room for evidence collection and began questioning dorm residents and identifying potential witnesses. In the preliminary stages of the investigation, it was believed the deaths were an isolated incident, domestic in nature. Blacksburg Police Department were also on the scene assisting the Virginia Tech Police with establishing a safety perimeter around the residence hall and securing Washington Street. At 7:30 a.m., investigators were following up on leads concerning a person of interest in the relation to the double homicide. Investigators from the Virginia Tech Police and Blacksburg Police were actively following up on various levels. At 8:25, the Virginia Tech leadership team assembles, that includes me and the other senior officers of the institution, and began assessing the developing situation at the residence hall and determining a means of notifying students of the homicide. At 9 a.m., the team was briefed. They had had a chance to interview a number of witnesses by then on the situation, and Virginia Tech Police Chief Wendel Fletcher on the latest developments in the ongoing investigation. At 9:26, the Virginia Tech community, that's all faculty and students, that's about 36,000 emails, were notified of the homicide investigation and seen at West Ambler Johnston Residence Hall and asked to report any suspicious activity. The Virginia Tech emergency weather line recordings were also transmitted, and a broadcast telephone message was made to campus phones. A press release was drafted and posted on the Virginia Tech website. At 9:45, the Virginia Tech Police received a 911 call of a shooting at Norris Hall. This building contains faculty offices, classrooms, and laboratories. The Virginia Tech Police and the Blacksburg Police immediately responded to Norris Hall. Notice in Leadership Command Center via our police representatives of the shooting that was going on. We were actually having a meeting about the earlier shooting when we got word on the radio that another shooting was underway. Upon arrival to Norris, the officers found the front doors barricaded. Within a minute, the officers breached the doors, which had been chained shut from the inside. Once inside the building, the officers heard gunshots. They followed the succession of gunshots to the second floor. Just as officers reached the second floor, the gunshots stopped. The officers discovered the gunman who had taken his own life. There was never any engagement between the responding officers and the gunman. And at 9:55, by the same means as prior notice, Virginia Tech notified campus community of the second murder scene. Other notifications followed via other means. So we'd be happy to respond to questions at this point. Chief?
What are you hearing in terms of conditions of the students that are still in the hospital and maybe names of some of the victims?
We are still in the process of notifying the families of the victims. It's an ongoing process. They have not all been notified. As far as the conditions of people in the hospital, I do not have that information at this time.
Do you know how many students, I know last time we checked you had trouble with how many students were shot and killed, how many professors. Have you been able to get an update on that?
We do not.
Did you identify the gunman yet?
Have you been identified as a student or someone who didn't belong here?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of your question.
What can you tell us about the shooter? Was that a student?
We have a preliminary ID that I'm not prepared to release yet, but the investigation is ongoing, and we are making progress.
Was he a student or not?
In the classroom, as you understand it, what are the witnesses telling you? We understand that some people maybe jumped from some of the windows, and we understand that perhaps the shooter may have come back to the classroom after leaving. At one point, can you tell us anything about that?
I do not have all the details. As I said earlier, there were a couple of people that did jump out of a window in that building.
What did Norris look like? Were there any surveillance cameras at either location?
No, there's not.
Are you looking for anybody else?
We are still actively investigating this case, and we are following up on all leads, yes.
Is there another gunman?
Again, we are following all leads and information as we get it.
Does your preliminary identification of the gunman found dead match the person of interest from the dorm? Is that the same suspect?
No, it is not.
What can you tell us about the weapons?
We've recovered 2 weapons. I'm not prepared to release what type they were, but we have recovered 2 weapons.
Handguns?
Again, I'm not prepared to release the type of weapons they were.
Do you believe the shooter brought the chains into the building?
We don't know at this point.
Chief, were all of the doors...
Were the chains there before, Chief?
I do not know.
Chief, what was happening after the first shooting? What happened after the first shooting? What was the disposition to be searched for a suspect? How did another shooting happen?
In the first incident, based on the preliminary information that we had, we began an investigation looking into different leads. As that investigation progressed, we identified a person of interest, which we worked towards obtaining witness information. So it was an ongoing process and took some time to get that done. You know, keep in mind, when we first got there, we had to figure out exactly what we had first. So it did take some time to get all that in place and going.
Have you found that person of interest?
Yes.
Chief, can you at least tell us if this was a student or not?
Again, it's preliminary. I don't want to release that information until we're absolutely certain of who this person is.
I have a question. In the other school shootings that have happened in the past, what made this so different that over 30 lives were lost? What were the differences?
I don't have the answer for that.
Why are you reluctant to tell us what types of weapons?
Part of it is the ATF is helping us with ballistics, and what they're doing is comparing the ballistics evidence from the first homicide to the incident at Norris Hall. So at this time, we're declining to release those type of weapons.
Is that person of interest in custody?
No.
If all instances are related, I know the last time you said that you were still trying to investigate that. Do you believe they're both related now? Or
That is still ongoing, and part of it is going to tell us once we get the ballistic evidence back.
Sir, you said there was a person of interest in custody?
No, there's no one in custody.
That person, was he one of the victims?
No.
Okay, you're sort of implying that the first shooter was not the same as the second shooter. So can you clarify?
I'm not implying that.
Okay,
what I'm saying is
you're sort of intimating there's somebody still out there.
No, that's not what I'm saying. There's someone still out there. I'm not saying there's not. We are trying to determine whether the 2 incidents are connected. Part of that will be the ballistics test that we are having done. I'm sorry, everyone's talking at one time.
The
person we preliminarily identified?
Yes.
Not to my knowledge.
Is the first person of interest still a person of interest?
Yes.
What's the evidence that it was a domestic dispute, the first shooting?
It's based on the preliminary information we obtained from the officers on the first scene as they began their investigation, talking to witnesses.
Chief, did you say that the description of the first shooter, the dormitory incident, that description of that suspect does not fit the description of the gunman who you found dead in Norris Hall?
I've never released a description of the suspect in the dorms.
Is that what you just said earlier? About 5 minutes ago?
I'm not sure I released a description. If I did, that's not what I was implying. We identified a person from that first investigation that led us to that person as a person of interest.
Chief, can you describe what Norris Hall looked like when you got there?
It's probably one of the worst things I've seen in my life.
Can you describe it?
Not this time.
Does the person of interest and the person that you believe you identified from the first instance, does that match the person that you preliminarily identified in the second?
No, they're not the same person.
So what would you say to the parents about the safety of this campus if you possibly are still looking for something?
Again, before we can comment on whether they're related, we're still waiting for lab results to come back. We're still doing investigations. There's a lot of work to be done yet before we jump to a conclusion that it is connected or is not connected.
You said that it was a domestic, isolated incident that you believe. What led you to believe that the first incident was of a domestic nature?
As I stated earlier, it was the information we obtained from the officers who arrived on scene first, based on witnesses.
What's going to happen to the suspect's ballistic information?
I don't know the timeline on that information.
Can you tell us something about the 2 hours that you saw for the first murders? Do you think you should have shut the campus down and locked it down on any murder, for any reason? A murder is a murder.
We acted on the best information we had at the time. What you need to understand is this is a campus of over 2,600 acres, well over 100 buildings, 26,000 students, faculty and staff. A lockdown or shutdown does not happen in seconds. You also need to understand at the time the first incident happened, there were people on their way to campus, to come to work, to come to class. Getting notification to them was very difficult. So we made the best decision based on the information we had at the time.
Can you tell us any more about the scene at Norris Hall?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all your questions.
Can you tell us any more about the scene at Norris Hall? Where did you find the suspected gunman? And were there multiple shooting scenes at Norris Hall, or was it all confined to the same place?
We are treating the entire building as a crime scene. There is more than one location in Norris Hall.
Do you believe these shootings were execution style?
I do not know.
Have lockdown procedures changed?
Excuse me?
Have lockdown procedures changed?
I'm sure after all this is over, we will all sit down and talk about this incident, what we could do better, what we did right, and those type things. Whether they're going to change or not, I couldn't tell you.
How many doors at Norris were chained and how many were partial?
I do not have the answer to that. I know for certain that 2 were chained.
Were they like the more common flood entrance type?
Yes.
Sir, several times you stated that the school is...
Members and staff from the university injured or killed?
Yes, there was.
Can you tell us how many?
I do not have the number of how many, but there were staff members that were deceased.
Chief, are you looking for a suspect still?
I keep going back to what I said. We are actively pursuing all leads in this investigation to determine whether they are or not related.
Is there someone out there loose or not?
Not to my knowledge.
Chief, why is the person of interest not in custody?
Because they're a person of interest. We don't have a crime to charge them with. We don't have anything to charge them with, probable cause yet.
Are they related to the shooter?
Excuse me?
Person of interest. Are they connected to the shooter? Are they related?
We do not know that yet, whether they are or not.
And the victims at the dorm, Chief, do they have any connection or relation to the shooter and or the person of interest?
We are still trying to determine that.
Chief, have you ruled out murder-suicide in the incident at the dorm?
Yes.
President Speaker, this is a horrible thing. We wish it didn't happen.
Actually gave it.
Are you satisfied with the decision-making that the leadership team...
Well, I went through the timeline, and I think it's very important that before you take these actions, you know what the facts are. It takes some time to do that. Based on that, I think we did everything we could based on what we knew at that time. As you appreciate, you only have minutes to take these actions, and we certainly don't want to take actions that are inappropriate, but we did everything we thought we should do.
Did you consider blocking off the roads into the campus? Did you consider telling everybody to just go and go quickly? You waited a long time.
Well, it's leaving the campus is a significant event. If you remember, we have 9,000 on campus, but we have 26,000 altogether. If you add together our part-time and full-time employees, we have 10,000 employees, and we also have on any given day literally several thousands of visitors. So we did block off Washington Street immediately. That's the street next to the Ambler Johnston dorm. And then subsequently, of course, we shut down the entire campus with barricades so no one could come in.
Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thank you for watching us tonight on a very tragic day in America. Mass murder in Virginia. Now, my usual talking points will be delivered a bit later on. They deal with how the far left is trying to exploit the IMA situation with the Queen of Mean, Rosie O'Donnell, leading the way. But first, the death toll continues to rise on the campus of Virginia Tech University, located in Blacksburg. Here's the timeline. At 7:15 this morning, a gunman killed 2 students at the West Ambler Johnston Hall, a dormitory on campus. Even though the shooter was not caught, college authorities did not lock down the campus, and people went to class and continued to walk around outside. That proved to be a fatal mistake, because 2 hours later, the gunman struck again, this time executing 30 students in a lecture hall. Authorities say he used 2 9mm automatic handguns. Finally, the students were notified by email to lock their doors and stay inside. Now, college president Charles Steiger explained the university's bad judgment.
We concluded first that the incident in the Ambler Johnston was domestic in nature. In fact, we had some reason to think the shooter had left the campus. In fact, may have been leaving the state. And this other event occurred 2 hours later.
Now, the mass murder at Virginia Tech was the deadliest shooting rampage in American history. At 12:23, the gunman, still unidentified, was confirmed dead by authorities. It is believed he committed suicide. Tonight, many questions remain unanswered about the motive, who the killer is, although authorities do know. And as soon as that information becomes available, we will bring it to you. And joining us now from the phone, by the phone I should say, from the campus of Virginia Tech, Daniel Smith, a sophomore who had some friends in the lecture hall where many of the students were killed. Now, Daniel, I want to basically walk through this with you. The whole incident began about 7:30 in the morning. Were you up and awake at that time and out?
Actually, yes, I was. I was over in one of the gyms. I usually do a morning workout every single day. So I was over at the gym about 7 o'clock till about 8:45 to 9.
All right. Now, from 7:30 to 8:45, the authorities, the police on campus knew there was a murder. Did you know anything about that?
I had no idea whatsoever.
All right. So you're in the gym, and then you walk from the gym where?
Took a shower. I picked up my girlfriend who's over at Fletcher Hall. Still at that same time, I had no idea that there was something going on. My girlfriend did mention that she got an email stating that there was a shooting, because I did notice that there was a lot of police officers in the area. And, but still, we were like, oh, well, let's go to class. I walked her. We usually walk around. It was a nice day, kind of windy, but it was still nice after.
All right, so no bullhorns and nobody saying stay inside. So you and your girlfriend are walking around, and then a couple of hours later, the guy comes back from wherever he was hiding from the authorities and executes 30 more people. Now, when that happened, how did you know about it? Did all hell broke loose, or what?
Basically, all hell broke loose. I had a class at Norris Hall at 11:15, and we were walking towards the hall about 10:30, 10:35. And by that time, I noticed that there was a lot of police presence in the area, and we knew there was something going on. And I saw students running out of Norris Hall, basically screaming. Then I saw police officers coming out, too, holding people by their arms and legs. It was one of those just weird moments. I'm still in shock.
All right, but there was still no attempt, though, to keep you inside or do anything like that, even at this late time. Because that's the key. I mean, I know Virginia Tech, it's about 25,000 students. I mean, it's like a city. It's huge. But at this point, students were still milling around, correct? They're outside and all of that.
Yep, students were still around, walking around. We went and got coffee over at a shop nearby our hall. We had no idea, none whatsoever.
Subsequently, between then and now, have you talked to anybody who saw what happened or who was in the middle of it?
Well, we haven't been able to speak to anybody who's been actually at that hall. I'm an engineer major. The friends that I knew were at the hall right now, I have yet to hear from them.
So you knew some people in the hall where 30 students were shot, maybe a teacher or two, I should say. But you knew people in there?
I knew people that were in that hall. I can't verify if they were in that exact classroom. We haven't gotten any information on that.
Now, this evening, is there any anger by the students that they weren't informed earlier, or what is the mood on campus?
It's an eerie mood on campus right now. There's a lot of anger going on between just the students saying, God, why weren't we informed earlier? Why wasn't it more of a pressure for us to stay inside? But at the same time, it's a sad mood because a lot of us, we never thought something like this would happen.
Whoever, millions of Americans go to college, and you know, obviously this is an anomaly. The worst mass murder in American history. Well, Daniel, I appreciate you taking the time. I'm glad you are safe, and we are going to talk to a couple of other students who have other perspectives on the Virginia Massacre, the deadliest mass murder, as I said, in U.S. history, and we'll have that in a moment. And later on The Factor, more madness from Rosie O'Donnell. Tom Daly will weigh in on that. Wait till you hear this. This is really out of control. And then I will debrief Michelle Malkin about her Black Panther encounter while she was subbing for me last Thursday night. You might have seen that. It was unbelievable. If you haven't, we'll run you the clip again as The Factor continues all across the USA and all around the world.
Setting that scene.
Joe, on this cold evening on this campus that is demonstrably in shock, I just spoke to a young man who came here after 4 years of college to study engineering. And today, he was actually surprised tonight, having heard none of the coverage of what happened here today, to hear my characterization that he had witnessed a small part of what is being called the largest mass shooting in American history. He was sitting in a classroom in the building now famous for what happened there today when he heard thumps that he later identified as gunshots in the room next to his. He knew enough to get out of there. There was some disagreement among the students in his classroom whether to leave out a second-story window or whether to stay. They threw the window up and knocked out a screen door, and they dangled by the windowsill until they dropped into whatever shrubs and bushes were below. Not enough to break their fall. He has twisted his ankle, he scratched his leg, but otherwise he is looking back with tremendous clarity tonight. I'm afraid, and it always sounds a bit patronizing when we often come into a situation like this where there's been great tragedy and great sadness, to say that people are in a kind of shock, but I'm afraid that is what is in effect here tonight. I've spoken to many students, many of them able to quite matter-of-factly discuss what happened here today, and of course the great sadness has not set in. In the case of this particular young man, he knows students in that classroom. He knows the students who said they weren't going to jump out that window. He knows some of the students didn't make it out of that classroom. And yet there's no information tonight, no names yet being released as they call and make the next of kin notifications. As a 40-mile-an-hour wind whips this hillside in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, this small college town where, after all, Virginia Tech is everything, a community of 26,000 people, is indeed hurting as the entire nation comes to grips with what happened here today. Joe.
Brian Williams, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We greatly appreciate your insight and setting the scene for those of us who've just been watching this all day today on TV. Thank you so much. Now, We're going to continue following this story throughout the hour, and we're going to bring you the very latest developments. But right now, let's listen to an eyewitness account from a Virginia Tech sophomore who was actually shot today while he was simply sitting in German class.
We saw him actually reload a clip while he was in our room. He had unloaded probably 8 or 10 shots into people in our class, very tragically. And he reloaded his clip and nobody could really stop him because we were all hit or scared out of our minds.
Methodically, like in a movie, like you see people reload in the movies and on television.
Yeah, he looked to be trained in how fast he reloaded the gun.
How would you describe him physically?
He was a male Asian, about 6 feet tall, with a maroon hat and a leather jacket on.
Either of you guys recognize him from around campus?
Not at all.
Here's Clint Van Zandt. He's a former FBI profiler and MSNBC analyst. You know, Clint, every time a tragedy like this happens, it seems that people are trying to figure it out, trying to point the finger and blame somebody.
Leaves the Middle East because of violence to come to peaceful Blacksburg, Virginia, and gets this. We have another tape to show you. Erin Sheehan was an eyewitness survivor of today's massacre at Virginia Tech. She was in class at Norris Hall when the gunman carried out his rampage, and here is some of what she saw.
He just stepped within 5 feet of the door and just started firing. He seemed very thorough about it, getting almost everyone down, or I pretend to be dead, just on the ground. And then he left for about 30 seconds, came back in, did almost exactly the same thing, because I guess he heard us still talking. And then we forced ourselves against the door so he couldn't come in again because the door would not lock. And so he came and tried to force himself in another 3 times, then started shooting through the door.
Brianna Keeler is one of many CNN correspondents on the scene. What's the latest from your vantage point, Brianna?
Well, there's certainly some confusion here, Larry, that we learned during the last press conference, and that's because there was one shooting, of course, reported at 7:15 a.m. this morning, and another one reported almost 2.5 hours later at 9:45 a.m. And what we heard was that during the first shooting at a dorm where, of course, a man and a woman were killed, police say they identified a person of interest. They say they've spoken to that person of interest. That person remains a person of interest, although they're not in police custody. And then in the second shooting, they have preliminarily identified the gunman there who did kill himself in the Norris Hall here on campus, where 31, including the gunman, were killed. But the problem, it appears, is that the descriptions of these two don't match. So therein, of course, lies the problem. The question being, is there someone else out there, perhaps another gunman? And what we heard from Virginia Tech Police Chief Wendel Flincher a few hours ago, he said, no, there isn't. But when you listened very carefully, Larry, during this last press conference, he didn't commit to that same answer. But if you speak with students here, they really have no doubt that these two shootings were linked.
At 7:15 a.m. this morning in a dormitory. This is understandably a time on campus for many people to come together, students, friends, and loved ones. Deb Fayrick, as we just told you, spent the evening visiting with parents and here at the Inn on campus. We're trying to get much more information on that. There's confusion on campus as well. So much more information. We need to get questions for you tonight. What happened in this investigation? How are the families being told? Are the students getting information they need? We do know classes are canceled tomorrow. There will be a service here on campus tomorrow. We're told tonight to expect not only the students, some families, dignitaries, including most likely the president on campus as well, but many more questions for us tonight. We will continue to track them. First, I will take a quick break. Be right back with more of this special edition of 360 Massacre on the Virginia Tech campus. Please stay with us.
Well, certainly he can do all he can. The federal government can obviously provide assistance where it's needed. The president spoke to Virginia Tech's president and to the governor of Virginia today as well. At this point, the people I'm talking to in the White House say it's likely that the president will go tomorrow to a service that'll be held at Virginia Tech tomorrow afternoon. They want to work out all the details of that before they make it official. The president today was actually in the middle of a private lunch in the West Wing. Aides had been monitoring the news out of Virginia Tech. They certainly knew it was a bad incident to follow. At that point, maybe one fatality. And then it's during the lunch hour, then they realize with the rest of the country, the full magnitude of this massacre. An aide interrupted the president in his lunch. He started watching the coverage and was horrified by it. Later, he spoke to the nation.
Our nation is shocked and saddened by the news of the shootings at Virginia Tech today. The exact toll has not yet been confirmed, but it appears that more than 30 people were killed and many more were wounded.
The president speaking earlier today. And to give you a sense how this has overshadowed everything in Washington, the Attorney General was supposed to appear before the Senate Judiciary Committee tomorrow to talk about the firings of those U.S. attorneys. Certainly a big issue. That's now been postponed in light of this massacre at Virginia Tech until later in the week.
What about that's a very important point, though, because this was also to be, for that reason and others, a very intense week for the president. And it raises the question about the political ramifications even further, David, and specifically about the gun control debate. What more might you add to this?
Well, there's no question that that debate will come up anew, as it does after incidents like this, as well as other cultural questions about the violent images in our culture. The president's spokeswoman said today, reaffirmed, as some other Republicans have around town, that the president does believe in the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, and that law enforcement should prevail here in terms of enforcing the gun laws that are already on the books.
All right, NBC's David Gregory tonight in Washington. David, thank you. Now let's go back to Brian in Blacksburg, Virginia. Brian?
We're all together and extending our compassion and our regrets to the families of those who are involved. This is a great institution. The lives that were lost today were people who had, in their early days, demonstrated an enormous amount of promise.
Welcome back, everyone, to this special edition of Fox and Friends this morning, the massacre at Virginia Tech. A short time ago, the university president told Fox News' Geraldo Rivera that the gunman who killed 32 people was an Asian male who was a student at the university and a dorm resident. We're going to have more details from the university president coming up.
All right, and we want to really hash this out now because there's so many facts cascading in. A partial list of those who were killed has been released, and the family and friends are being notified. It's a tragic situation, obviously, and we've been telling you that for hours. Joining us from Blacksburg, Virginia, still with us, of course, is Geraldo Rivera and Shepard Smith as well in a separate location. Back on the set, guys, as we roundtable this, David Katz, the president of Global Security Group, a real firearms expert, and legendary Bo Dietl, retired NYPD detective, one of the best. First off, Bo, Shep Smith had a great point last hour. The investigation led them off campus, it seems, after the first shooting at the dorm. So at 7:15 this happens. They're following a black truck. They think it's leaving off campus. The decision was made. Let's let these kids go to class. We think it's an isolated, tragic but isolated double homicide.
You know, again, I didn't come here to be Monday morning quarterback, but you have 2 dead bodies in the dormitory. I think for the young students to miss a class wouldn't be the worst thing in the world at that point. If you had 1 dead body with a suicide, it's still enough for colleges to close down because something horrific happened. You have to deal with the mental psyche of these students relating to someone dead in the dorm. Now you have 2 dead. And again, if you found the weapon there, then you could possibly think it was a suicide murder or whatever. But in this case, you have 2 dead bodies there. You don't have the person. You've got to worry about the safety of these students. That should be the paramount thing. Close the classes down until we know what we got. It's very easy to second guess again. They possibly thought the guy bolted after the murder, but did he bolt? 2,500 acres is a city, and then you have 100 buildings. I understand it's very difficult to search, but shut the classes down. If a tornado was coming that way, they didn't want people on the grounds, sirens would have went off. It's enough for sirens. It's enough for the uniformed personnel to go over there and to shut things down.
David, Bo brings up the point, it's so easy to second guess the morning after, even a few hours after. But what are your feelings about the fact that this was like a city? I mean, 26,000 students here. If they sent out a text message and tried to lock down, do you think that would have made a huge difference?
Well, the text message, that's not a reliable way of communicating such an important bit of information to students. Text messages, okay, if you have a BlackBerry, that'll be somewhat effective. If you're just sending regular email messages, unless you're sitting in front of the screen, you're not getting that message.
Well, they sent it at 9:26, but that was more than 2 hours after the event, and lots of kids were roaming around campus at that point.
You're only getting it if you're sitting in front of your computer screen.
And the thing is, too, if you're in class, you shut your phone off or you get in a lot of trouble. So you might get a text message and not even get it until you put it back on after the class. Hey, Shep, you've been talking to CIA people and FBI people overnight. Can we move this forward?
Well, you know, I can tell you this. Imagine Rockefeller Center in Midtown Manhattan, and people are on the commute in from New Jersey and Connecticut and Long Island, and you've got to tell them all not to come to work. And you have 17 entrances to the buildings in which they work. I think we all need to slow down just a little bit. These people interviewed, the authorities interviewed people inside that dorm room, and they were sure that what they had was a domestic incident. Domestic incidents rarely spread in this way. I mean, we use history as our guide in law enforcement, in reporting, in our everyday lives. I'm sure there's going to be time for second-guessing this, but well, I'm not sure it's right now. None of us knows exactly what's going on. As far as investigating this, I can tell you this. They took the victims out 2 by 2. The information that came from the scene is taken to the National Crime Lab in Annandale. Their first priority was to match ballistics, and it's my understanding that when this news conference begins at 9 o'clock Eastern time, maybe an hour and something from now, that we're going to have more information that may in fact be able to tie these two scenes together. In addition, while we're on it, the 2 o'clock memorial service this afternoon, the White House has just announced that the president will be attending that here today as the White House tries to help this campus get through its grief and its heartache and its questions like we all have about how it all went down.
Yeah, so the president said he was going to come. Now, Bo, look at this in Geraldo, your good buddy Bo Dietl here. He says the gunman evidently, according to eyewitnesses, walked in, coldly shot in the classroom. He didn't look angry. He didn't say a word. He didn't look as though he knew anybody in these rooms. Profile this guy from what you know.
Well, from my experience, the big case that I had before I retired was the Palm Sunday Massacre, where the guy had 2 guns. He killed 10 people as they sat in shock, and no one ran, because for some reason psychologically when someone's shooting somebody, you think when you're going to run you're going to get shot in the back, and they freeze in motion for some reason, and these people thought that, hey, maybe he was going to stop, but if I run he's going to shoot me. And this is the psyche why he was able to kill so many people, because certainly if they all tried to run away, he would have maybe got some of them. The most important thing I wanted to say to Shep was what I've been getting phone calls from parents, and how could I protect my kid on the college campus. I think what we have to do is learn from what occurred here, that there has to be things that are put in effect, security measures and safety procedures if something happens for the future, because you have copycats out there, Shep, that are watching this right now, and God forbid someone else does something. We always talk about Al-Qaeda sending a couple of teams into colleges and doing something like this. We have to build on this, Shep, not knock what occurred, but let's go for the future.
I know
and see
we
if
do.
We can...
I think you're absolutely right, but I mean, think of this. How do you secure a campus of this kind? How could you lock such a thing down? If this could happen in a mall, how would you secure a mall from something? It could happen in a subway station. It could happen on the street corner. It could happen in Times Square. When the United States decides to become a locked-down fortress in every nook and cranny of the nation, well, we're not exactly the nation we were before. I don't think the students at Virginia Tech University, under any circumstances, want to have armed guards at every entrance to every building, that they want to have to walk through metal detectors, that they want their lives to be changed in that way. Whether they have that option or not going forward is another story.
Geraldo, do you want to weigh in on this?
I do. I think that we at Fox News have recently been given a code red, where if we're in a situation, whether it's a terrible car crash or if we're in the field in a dangerous foreign environment and someone gets snatched or hurt, we can code red instantly communicating. I think that every institution over a certain size should be mandated to have a code red, whether it's for a tornado, whether it's for some other kind of imminent extreme weather, whether it's for a maniac on the loose, whatever it is. I think we do need that. We have evolved to this point now, with all sympathy to everyone involved in this thing, where we can have one crazed individual becoming a weapon of mass destruction. This person
we see it in Iraq every day, don't we?
The worst murder ever.
We see it in Iraq every way. People coming in with body bombs, blowing up Bradleys. But now, David, let me ask you this. Let's move forward. How does someone who we understand might very well be an exchange student get this type of weaponry when he lands here, according to the Chicago Sun-Times, August 7th. We do know confirmed that he is Asian, and he was a student there.
The investigation certainly is going to center on how he actually got access to the weapon and the ammunition. Legally, he had no right to do so.
And he had a lot of ammunition.
Well, you know, if you think about it, when I was an instructor at Quantico, and when we put our guys on the firing range, we would tell them to load 4 magazines and put an extra 100 rounds in their pockets. That's 150 bullets that trainees would just have for one course of fire. So that's really not, it's not hard to carry 150, 200, 300 rounds on your person. It's done every day. Look at any police officer,
reality.
50 rounds with them as a compliment.
Excellent perspective.
Excellent. All right, David Katz, Bo Dietl, thanks for coming back and sharing your perspective.
Are you going to stay? All right, you going to stay over? Geraldo and Shep, you guys stay put too. We're going to take a short time out and come back and review the worst shooting massacre in this nation's history. We've just gotten confirmation, Shep mentioned it, the President, Mrs. Bush, heading to Virginia Tech, should be there by 2 p.m. this afternoon Eastern Time.
8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning here in the East. I'm David Gregory. You're watching special coverage here on MSNBC of the massacre at Virginia Tech. In a couple of minutes, you see a live picture there at the hospital in Blacksburg. We'll get an update on the wounded there. Also this hour, we'll talk to NBC's justice correspondent Pete Williams for the latest information on the shooter and the investigation. Also, Clint Van Zandt, the former FBI profiler, on how we make sense of any of this, how the FBI, how investigators try to do it, and where the investigation goes as well. 9 o'clock, by the way, right here on MSNBC, we'll hear from university officials as they hold another briefing. And at 2 o'clock today, there's a convocation, a service down at Virginia Tech. The President and Mrs. Bush will go. The President will speak during that service. He'll spend some time down there today, maybe visit some various spots on the campus. We've talked about his role as mourner-in-chief. We'll see more of that later. Meantime, Mika Brzezinski is up at MSNBC, who's standing by with a little bit more information on the day and other news. Hi, Mika.
Well, David, first of all, we have found out that the president will be going to Blacksburg, Virginia today. And actually, there's a memorial service, as you mentioned, scheduled for 2 o'clock.